you have a short shelf life. You don't know how long you're going to live, even if you're not an athlete. And so you want to make sure that your money and your wealth is going to last for a long time. And if you have family, you want to be able to pass that on. And I think that's how any investor, anyone who's thinking about money, which we should be when we're living in a fiat world where our money constantly debases, we need something that will last. And I think that's what Bitcoin is. It's a symbol to an investor, to an athlete, to anyone, that this is money that's going to last and it's going to be around for a long time.
We're talking about Bitcoin as a savings technology. Russell, when you're talking to athletes, people you know, how are you introducing Bitcoin these days? Is it different than what you've said in the past?
Yeah, I think my perspective on Bitcoin shifted a little bit. I typically like to read the Bitcoin white paper prior to come to any conference. And
just a habit.
Yeah, just as a habit, right? Just as a refresher, right? I like to go back to where I was when I first.
As a meditation almost.
Yeah. And
so was the white paper your introduction?
Well, the white paper was not my introduction, but I remember one of my good friends telling me way back in 2016, he said, Bitcoin is time, right? And he helped me analogize my football experience. And what he told me was, look, Russell, you are spending your life, your years, using brute force, right, to run into people for a full-time living. But like he said earlier, your shelf life is very short.
Right.
Your shelf life is very short. So when I decided to take my money into Bitcoin to be paid in Bitcoin, right, at the time, Bitcoin was moving at 200 to 400% in value. And it was literally one of the best decisions I could ever made. Because while I was so caught up in doing and beating people up and banging my head against other people, right, I was able to capture value at 200 to 400% from year to year, right? And I think that ultimately is the game changer. How I explain it to football players is, hey, if your wages are capped at X amount per year, and if you get paid too much, you'll likely be able to get cut. Well, if you took that into Bitcoin, well, now the team and you have the flexibility to actually think, right? To actually think about the situation you're in, rather than being forced to constantly do.
Well, and of course, it was a movement you started really getting paid in Bitcoin, and other athletes followed. We've seen some athletes follow. What's the barrier to athletes thinking about it now? Are there barriers that remain? Or if you were talking to an athlete, like, do you have something that you recommend, an allocation you recommend?
The allocation is first study Bitcoin. I think that's the first allocation you have to make. Before you even buy it, just start studying it and asking yourself questions about why do you save in the dollar, or why would you choose any investment, or why would you choose any money at all in the first place? And then as you do that, then just get a little bit and feel how it feels to have a money that's real. It's not credit, it's not fake, it can't be printed by anybody. I think the biggest barrier is that it's just hard for people to speak the language of money. It's not a language that most people are taught, and so you have to learn it and you have to do the work. And if you don't do the work, no one can do it for you. It's just like if you're playing a sport, no one can run the sprints for you. No one can do the weights for you. No one can do the training or the film. You have to do it for yourself. And most people want to have a financial advisor. They want to sit back and they just want to send that to somebody else and just offload all the work. And you can't when it comes to money. If you want to be free, you have to do the work, and that's the price of freedom is the work that's involved.
It takes work to understand Bitcoin. Of course, a little bit more fun here in Nashville, Tennessee at the Bitcoin Conference. We're going to throw it over to our roving reporter, Q, who is live in the audience now to give us a dose of what it's like to be on the floor. Stay with us.
Thanks, Rizzo. I'm coming to you live from down at the Exposition Hall. Behind me, you can see the line just to get into the Nakamoto main stage. It is absolutely bananas over here. Everyone has to go through essentially a TSA screening to get into the main stage. Secret Service is all over the place. We know the line is insane. It's taken a long time to get it. It actually stretches all the way to the back of the Exposition Hall. And behind me to my right, I'm actually in front of Media Row. We have over 400 different media companies covering this event live. Behind me is the Daily Wire, CNBC, and Fox as well. So if you're not watching here, smash the subscribe button down below. Back to you at the desk, Rizzo.
Pro athlete panel. I want to go to something that was heard on stage. Anthony Scaramucci speaking on that panel of investors. He said, we want Bitcoin to be bipartisan. Obviously, this conference coming under a little bit of fire for seeming partisan. Is that really reality? Is Bitcoin partisan? If you were asked that, how would you respond? Sean, I'll stick to you.
Bitcoin doesn't care. Bitcoin does not care. It does not know who Donald Trump is. It doesn't know who Kamala Harris is. It doesn't care. So, if you want wealth that lasts for a long time, we'll never know who any of us are, but we will know who Bitcoin is. And I think that's the difference. So whoever makes that decision, you have the first mover's advantage. And that's how I look at it. It doesn't care about who is the president. It has no idea that the United States even exists.
Of course, Bitcoin, a software, but yourself, a voter. Has Bitcoin changed your perspective or on the choice in November?
I look at it as when it comes to Bitcoin and voting, I just want someone who's not going to tax it. I think that's the thing that I look at. Someone that's not going to tax Bitcoin, who's going to look at it as money, and I don't know if anyone really understands it to that level yet, besides Bukele. And I think that's what we're seeing.
President Bukele, Nayib Bukele of El Salvador, of course. Russell, your perspective on this partisanship, obviously a lot of red hats around here, people who maybe want to see their party use Bitcoin as a tool for power. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess I would have a little bit of a different perspective. Bitcoin certainly is not bipartisan, but it's certainly pro-human. So when I think about Satoshi in the white paper, what does it really reveal? It reveals that Bitcoin is not limited to the deployment of technology, right? That ultimately it's us, it's we, humans. We are the source code of progress. We are the algorithms of advancement. We are powerful, truly, beyond measure. And it's our creativity, it's our ingenuity, our adaptability. What does Satoshi do? He could understand, him and a group of people could understand that there needed to be an adequate response to central banking, an adequate response to the issues that we were dealing with intermediaries, right? And that ultimately is who we are as humans. We have the ability to respond. So what is Bitcoin? It's not bipartisan, it's pro-human, right? But Bitcoin is a reminder of human greatness. That's who we are.
Well, I feel like it takes the government away from the human interaction, right? And I think that's how I look at it is if humans, we want to interact, and that's what Bitcoin can provide is a true peer-to-peer, not a peer to a government to a peer. And it just gets us back into being who we should be. We should be free men. We should be working hard and doing things and living how we want to live. And if we have a government telling us or regulating us on how we can live and what we can do, then it prohibits us from truly being free. And that's what Bitcoin brings back to us, is that freedom.
Some quick thoughts before we're back to the main stage. Talking about Satoshi, how would he feel about this event? You think this is Satoshi's vision, what he had in mind for Bitcoin? Russ, quickly.
This is the human vision. This is our vision. We will always learn, grow, collaborate, right, and be together in person. I'm much more interested in the social layer that exists in Bitcoin. Everybody's talking about L1s and L2s. All these things are great. We need to figure these things out.
The people's movement.
Exactly.
Sean, quickly, before we're back at the main stage.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for having us on, and we appreciate it. I love this event.
We'll be right back at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville, Tennessee. Heading over to the main stage, Freedom Tech Bitcoin's Policy Outlook with Senator Bill Hagerty and Ron Rudy of Bitcoin Park. Stay with us.
So then, I know we got a short amount of time, so can I start off with a personal question then?
Yeah.
You sure?
Sure.
All right. Why do you love Bitcoin so much?
Wow. That gets to the DNA of a person.
All right, so this guy is the senator of
it
Tennessee.
really gets to the DNA of this state.
It looks like I looked at the timing wrong
because I love liberty.
when I converted from my
freedom.
time zone, and
I don't care for centralization.
Snowden will not be
and
out for
the
another
notion
2
of autonomy
hours.
is something I think every American appreciates. Go back to our founding fathers.
So that's kind of
the
a
whole
bummer,
notion of
but
federalism. And the authorities
That's
not explicitly given to the federal government should be reserved to the states. Yeah,
Trying
we
to
have a federal
see,
government right now that's trying to
so
grasp as much
right now,
authority and
1:30,
power
they're doing
centralization
Freedom
as
and
they can.
Tech,
So it's very basic and
Bitcoin's
very
policy
fundamental to
outlook
me.
in
One other thing,
2025 and beyond.
the innovative capacity of America
And
is
then
being demonstrated right now.
2 o'clock,
And if
they'll
we
have
don't
Sailor
nourish
come
and
out,
create
which
the
is something I
ecosystem
do
for
want
it
to see. So
thrive here,
that's great.
It'll go
He's going to
someplace
speak for
else.
half an hour.
I want to see America win because at my core, America is the winningest nation ever, and I got to see it happen here.
Well, I have to commend you. Yeah, big round of applause to that. That's awesome. One thing in the community we talk about is called proof of work,
And
which you're very
then, let's
familiar
see, 2
with
o'clock.
as well. And I have to applaud you and your team. You guys spent
I don't see the
now a number
Nakamoto
of years
stage.
at
Well,
Bitcoin
no,
Park.
so it'd be 2:30.
Getting to know the community, getting to
So
learn
2
more about
o'clock,
Bitcoin.
he's coming out.
But it seems like now,
Sailor,
look at this
so then
conference. We got a number of
230,
other
they got
senators, and they're learning about Bitcoin. Other
230
policymakers.
is going to be
What do you think is
Bitcoin
the
and
reason
macro
why there's
investment
such
trends
enthusiasm now
with
to learn about
Kathy Wood
Well,
of
as you
ARK
said, we can
Investments,
go
which
through it a
should be a
little
good
bit later.
one. That's
I've
something I
been
definitely want to watch.
working on this for some time, for years working with you, Rod, on this. But to
she's
see my
gonna
colleagues
speak
coming
for
together,
half an hour
and
into
I've
3
got a great
o'clock.
set of colleagues here, more to come, I think.
At
I
3
think what we see
o'clock,
is a
they're
crescendo
going to
that's been
do
started
For
by
Love
the
of
words
Country
one
and
man, that's
Bitcoin
President
with
Donald Trump.
Cynthia Loomis,
He's leaned into this. He's so
and
this
Tim
is fundamental
Scott,
to America's competitiveness.
which Cynthia
also
Loomis is
fundamental to our
definitely a
liberty and
big
freedom.
advocate of Bitcoin,
And
so
he is
that should be
leaning
interesting.
all in. I can't wait till tomorrow afternoon to hear his.
They're
to
going
hear
to speak
his
for half an
address
hour,
here.
and then that's
But I think
when
that has been the thing that has spurred so many people to say, yes, the time is now
Snowden comes out.
for us to embrace this industry.
Snowden's
for
going
us
to speak for half
address
an
it.
hour, and
Frankly,
then they go
what we're going to see is
into
in November, this industry is going to be on the ballot.
RFK,
Meaning, if you favor
who also will be speaking
centralization,
for half an
government
hour.
control, lack of sovereignty, then you
Yeah, I'm
can
just looking.
you can vote
After
for Vice President
RFK,
Harris.
there is
I wish you were here to have this conversation
Bitcoin is
with
freedom
us
of
today.
speech
I think her answers to the questions might be quite different.
with
If you want
the
liberty,
Rumble CEO
freedom,
and Russell Brand.
decentralization,
I don't really care about that, man.
the-
I'm not
the
a big
ability to
Russell Brand
self-custody
fan.
Your own assets.
I don't know whether they're trying
the
to
ability to control your own
push
destiny and not have your
Russell
privacy
Brand
invaded
to
by
the end of
controlling your
this.
transactions.
Yeah,
Then
who
Donald
cares
Trump
what
is
he
going to be a
thinks?
clear answer for you, and down the
I
ballot.
don't know. Maybe
the
I'm just a
Republicans
hater. But I
I'm
mean,
just
given the choice
thinking
between
that
listening
you would make a
to
great
Michael
Treasury
Saylor and
Secretary,
Russell
by the way,
Brand, I'm
and
going to
I'll
pick
get
Michael
to that
Saylor every
later
day.
on. You mentioned
There's a
pushing
Q&A
innovation offshore, but mentioned pushing
with
talent offshore.
RFK.
It does seem like
if
that,
they're
and I'm
gonna-
not trying to get political. Obviously, we got, but
sure if they're gonna stream
the
that or
current
not, though.
administration right now is very hostile to Bitcoin and crypto at large.
This thing's
What
it
do
goes
you
into
think
5
is
o'clock.
the motivation or the agenda behind that?
Well,
All right, so let's
the
go back
downside is what
to
you just articulated, and that is
Right now
by
in
not
Nashville,
creating
it
an embrace,
is
by not creating
1:34.
the ecosystem for success,
I'm gonna head
we're going
back
to see
up.
this industry move offshore along with the talent that goes with it. What also leaves this nation is our source of competitive advantage. America should be the hub of innovation. If you think about the steps here, from the internet to
Yeah.
cryptocurrency to what will happen with artificial intelligence, we need to be on that spectrum, and we need to be playing
Freedom and
hard
Tech,
every day.
Bitcoin's policy outlook
The
in
current
2025
administration
and
has a very
beyond.
different worldview, and
If I
that is one
scroll
that's based on
down
centralized
to
control.
2 o'clock, that's when Saylor
Central
is coming
control
out.
finds the whole notion of a decentralized currency repugnant.
So
The notion that you could
I
self-custody
definitely
your
like hearing
assets,
Michael Saylor
they
speak,
don't
so
want
that should be pretty cool.
This is about control.
This guy
We've
is
seen
a
it.
Tennessee senator. I mean, that's
Operation Choke
great
Point
and all that he's
in
into
the Obama
Bitcoin, but I
administration.
don't
Now
really
Choke
care.
Point 2.0 is coming after this industry right here. They're using the tools of the federal government to shut down an industry that they don't like. They've done it to private prisons. They'll do it if you want to buy a box of shotgun shells to go out and shoot skeet. Whatever they want to control, whether they want to geofence your driving pattern or whatever it might be, if they can control your means of transacting, they can control your life. That is the exact opposite of the position that I want to take. I want to see the Republican Party take. And if you, please.
I'm going to check my volume while this guy's speaking.
I just left the Republican National Convention last week. And as I said earlier this morning,
Test.
this feels today to me like
Test
the
the
Bitcoin
mic.
National Convention.
Testing volumes.
It's great to see
and
the Orange Party well represented
test.
here today.
All right, so give me a second. I'm
Thanks.
gonna check out my levels real quick.
As I said earlier this morning,
Test.
this feels today to me like
Test
the
the
Bitcoin
mic.
National Convention.
Testing volumes.
It's great to see
and
the Orange Party well represented
test.
here today.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna boost him a little bit, and then.
But to cover
we'll be
just
able to
some of
roll
the
with it.
planks on
Just
the
wanna make
Republican
sure
Convention regarding this
when
industry, we're going to end the
we're
war
listening to
on digital
Snowden, you
assets
can actually be heard.
day one.
So boost it just a little bit, you know.
That's great.
We're going to support the mining industry. We're going to support self-custody. All of the things that are necessary for this industry to thrive, we're there.
Definitely want to get to mining. One thing I want to just double click on and maybe expand on CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. Boo is right. Keep that booing going up. And I know you mentioned a number of
boo.
points on centralization.
CBDCs,
Actually, one of the first times,
boo.
or the second time you had visited Bitcoin Park, may have been the third time, we have these big signs that no CBDCs, central bank digital currencies enslaved. And I'm like, oh man, let's, and then you're like, yeah, F that. But there seems like a number of nations that are adopting CBDCs. Well, just trying to put on your, thinking about the other side, why do you think they are adopting CBDCs? And do you think in the U.S. there could be a scenario where CBDCs are adopted?
Yes, because
well,
it's
I
easier
think you
to
look
control
no
people.
further than Xi Jinping and the Communist Party in China to see where the largest footprint of adoption is taking place right there. And what does the CCP do? They want to control their population. You've got a social credit score. If they don't want you driving beyond the bounds of Beijing, they can stop you from buying fuel to do that.
Absolutely.
The tolls won't work for you. They can ease or constrain the flow of your funds based on your behavior. That is centralized control. That's the Chinese Communist Party. Why in the world would the United States want to adopt anything that the CCP thinks is a good idea?
Well, because then they can control you.
Yet,
Pretty simple idea.
Yet, we have a cabal in Washington that thinks this is a great idea. You think no further than when Silicon Valley Bank failed that weekend. The next morning, Monday morning after the failure, they had the former candidate for comptroller of the currency from Moscow State, by the way. She's on the radio on Bloomberg saying the only answer is a centralized digital currency. That's where they want to head things, and that is not where we can allow things to go. I think it will change in November. Again, it's on the ballot, but we have a chance to make a radical change in the right direction here.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So from a policy standpoint, and from the Republican side of you mentioned self-custody, you mentioned mining. What are things that we can do, or you guys can do to further enshrine or cement our natural rights in this regard, like self-custody?
We have several opportunities. The first will start in the executive branch with a series of executive orders that can facilitate the self-custody or any other aspect of the industry. But I think perhaps the most important thing on the executive branch side is changing personnel. That's what happens. And you can name a few that you'd like to see changed. I would start with Gary Gensler.
Yep. Guy gets it.
Right now, and Gary Gensler is a person that was at the MIT Media Lab. He understands the industry well. I think that's why he's been so effective at trying to crush it. But if we don't see a change, everybody in Washington, this is the worst kept secret in Washington, Gary Gensler's aspiration is to move from the SEC to become Treasury Secretary. Think about that for a moment.
Bad news bears.
Let that settle in.
I don't understand how someone can be so
maintain
bad
the gavel in the United States Senate. There's a very good chance Elizabeth Warren becomes the chair of the Senate Banking Committee. Think about that for the moment. So there is a real clear choice in the ballot. And we've got to take back the Senate. We've got to take back the White House. We've got to retain the House of Representatives. That gives us the maximum opportunity to take a step function leap in the right direction to support this industry, to create the proper ecosystem, the regulatory environment that's necessary to allow certainty, but not constraining. And what you'll see is appointees by President Trump at the SEC, at the CFTC, and other areas that are actually supportive of the industry. And rather than working in conflict with the industry, we'll be working collaboratively. That way, together, the federal government can support our nation's strengths, our competitive advantage. The United States will win yet again.
I love that. Absolutely. This did not happen overnight with you either. You've spent a number of times at the park, and you mentioned years versus weeks or days, and I know the proof of work you've already put in. Could you tell this audience a little bit more about how your view on Bitcoin, the technology, the monetary components has evolved over time?
That's an interesting question, and I think a lot of our audience wouldn't have a reason to know this. But before I came to the United States Senate, I served in the Trump administration. In fact, I'm the only former member of the Trump administration serving in the Senate.
It's still kind of crazy to me that
the U.S.
Trump
ambassador
is
to
the
Japan.
keynote speaker of this.
I think most of you know this. Japan is the third largest economy after the U.S. and China. It's a huge economic partner, but it's also a critical military and national security partner. In fact, we have more U.S. military stationed in Japan than any place else in the world. We're dealing with issues from North Korea, from Russia, from China, Taiwan, right at the doorstep there. This is an area where in 2017, when I took my office, we were very concerned about illicit finance that was supporting the North Korean regime and the aggressions in China. Here's my first big experience. I walked into my office one morning, and above the fold in the newspaper there was the fact that Coincheck had been heisted. That robbery took over $500 million in one night. Who had done it? I worked with my intelligence team. We found out very quickly a state actor was involved. Now, this is at a time when we are working aggressively to stop ship-to-ship transfers of coal to keep the North Koreans from getting $3, $5, $6 million, where we literally had our Secretary of State on the phone with other nations to not accept guest workers from North Korea because we didn't want them to obtain tens of millions of dollars. $500 million heisted in one night? We couldn't put the finger on North Korea, but I can tell you, I was deeply concerned, and the first place that I went was the use of cryptocurrency for illicit finance. I fly back to Washington, I meet with our Secretary of Treasury, Stephen Mnuchin. We had a conversation about it then, and this is again early, and we were both deeply concerned. Then what evolved? Wow, the ledger technology and the transparency that Chain provides actually allowed law enforcement with the proper authorities to begin to catch the people that were involved.
You mean just do the work?
Yeah, just do the work. Just do the work. And I realized this is actually far superior, certainly to cash, and it offers a unique opportunity, given the transparency and the way the ledger works, for something very interesting to happen. It's the converse of what you often hear in Washington, that this is illicit finance. One of my colleagues in the banking committee, Elizabeth Warren, points this out all the time. Cryptocurrency is evil because of its illicit finance, using numbers that have been completely debunked. But as I began to dig into it further and realized how smart contracts could work, how the technology would evolve, the efficiencies that we could gain in back office processes and procedures. As a business person, as somebody that I started my career at the Boston Consulting Group, I became a private equity investor, continually looking for companies that will transform with technology. This is a chance to transform our nation with technology. If you think about the productivity gains that we can achieve with this, this is going to be another step function in our productivity that will make America, again, the most competitive economy in the world. So my perspective completely changed as I dug into it. It's been spending time with you over the past few years, Rod, and your team, and with many others in the industry, that I have learned a tremendous amount. And I tell you, the creative talent in this industry, the energy behind it, is just exceptional. It's at the core of what makes America
10
great.
minutes before they're going to bring out Michael
Saylor.
Saylor.
I want to see it continue to
Let's
thrive.
go. Let's go.
Yeah. This guy needs to wrap it up for me.
So then let me maybe ask a more pointed question then, to not impede innovation here in the States. Do you believe that current KYC regulations are impeding business growth opportunities, even our personal liberties?
So Senator Warren has a one-size-fits-all approach to KYC. KYC, know your customer. Look, there are good and valid reasons for this sort of information to be collected at the appropriate points. But to come in and apply it across an industry that's evolved way beyond where we are today, from a bricks and mortar environment to where we are with the blockchain technology, is not working. And what is intended to be is a poison pill.
Right.
So we have to stop that.
Nobody wants to use KYC.
Let law enforcement do their job.
Yep.
But let's not kill an industry by imposing some sort of one-size-fits-all requirement that will not work. It needs to be far more thoughtful than that. And I think, at its core, this is just an effort to try to kill the industry using this
business
type of
decide if they
regulation.
want to actually have
It sounds
KYC.
good on the surface, but as you dig in, it's devastating because it's misapplied.
Yeah, that's fair. I did say earlier I wanted to get back on the miners. Mining is near and dear to me. I think here in the state of Tennessee, we have a unique opportunity to be one of the places that can lead the way with Bitcoin mining. It was public news, so I'm not speaking out of turn. You attended a meeting at Mar-a-Lago with a number of the top publicly traded mining company executives with President Trump. Should the
Insane
Republicans
that they're
win
actually
in
having meetings
2025,
about Bitcoin
what
mining.
would this mean for, let's say, specifically
Just a couple years ago, it was magic internet money, and now
the
Trump
Bitcoin
is
mining
headlining
industry has
this
been
event.
attacked aggressively by the environmentalists, by a number of people. Our view here in Tennessee is quite different, and President Trump gets this completely. The Bitcoin miners are tremendous customers for those who want to build out the electric grid. We want to build our grid out aggressively here in Tennessee.
Sure.
In fact, the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is our utility here, is the largest in the nation. It's a source of competitive advantage for Tennessee that we have this grid. The Bitcoin miners are coming to Tennessee. They're setting up operations. Frankly, they do it in rural areas that have lost jobs to offshoring, things of that nature. It's been good for our local economies, but they allow us to cost justify the build out. Tennessee right now has 42% of our complete energy portfolio in nuclear. Nuclear investments are massive. To be able to know that you've got the type of demand load that's necessary to justify the next level of investment is important. The Bitcoin mining industry can help us do that. And as we build toward the type of grid that will be necessary to support AI, you think about Elon Musk's big investment in Memphis that's coming in.
Absolutely.
You think about semiconductor manufacturing and fabrication we want to see happen here. I'd love to see it happen in Tennessee. We've got to build the grid for the future, and Bitcoin miners can help us get there. One of the unique aspects of the way the energy consumption profile for a Bitcoin miner is such that they can curtail their usage immediately if necessary. So if we have an event like a storm, super hot weather, or a freeze, they can shut down, whereas other industries cannot. So it adds a surge capacity, a sort of accordion, if you will.
On the flip side of that, will they shut down, though?
And in that respect, they're some of the best customers we could possibly have.
That's great. Curious your thoughts on nuclear, out of curiosity. Nuclear
is and should be a massive source of competitive advantage for America. We have Oak Ridge National Lab and the Tennessee Valley Authority right here. They understand how to do nuclear. The costs have grown exponentially. This is all a product of years ago, back in the 70s, with 3 Mile Island and a movie called The China Syndrome that scared everybody away from the industry. We were on the right sort of scale curve. We were lowering our cost, and we completely blew up the scale curves by backing out of the industry and imposing massive regulations. So the cost to build a new nuclear plant has gone through the roof. We need to take a realistic perspective on the permitting, the timelines, look at small modular reactors and a lot of other technologies that we can really succeed with, and go very hard at it. Again, the industry here can help us cost justify those investments.
That's fantastic. All right, we have to win in November. All right, we won November, we win. What else do you see on the agenda now?
Are they campaigning in this one?
We got House,
Senate, really,
presidency. What else is on the agenda?
But Trump headlining it kind of is like a
I think if you
Republican
look at what will be most
sort of thing, which
impactful
Republicans
for
are
the
actually more
entire
for
economy here,
crypto
and also from our
as of
geopolitical
now.
Position,
But
President Trump will get back into the energy business full bore.
Yeah.
What we saw happen on day one when the Biden administration came into office
that's the angle they're going to spend
more
this
on domestic energy.
Biden
immediately took federal lands off the map for exploration. That's a quarter of our capacity off the map right now. You try permitting a pipeline right now, a refinery, next to impossible. What they did is they flatlined us. We were on a growth trajectory like this in terms of our energy production. They
dang Democrats cutting
Their
down your
solution has been to
cryptocurrency.
appease Iran, let Russia produce, let Venezuela produce. That's not the right answer. America needs to go back into full production, and we will when President Trump comes into office. It will immediately lower cost. You think everything in America has to be transported. That will have an immediate positive impact on inflation, clearly. But it also makes us a much more powerful geostrategic partner, meaning we can become the supplier of choice to Europe again. We just lost that status in May of this year to Russia. We can become the supplier of choice throughout Southeast Asia. You think about a counterweight to China's Belt and Road Initiative, that is it. We can have a dramatic impact on our posture in the world if we play to our strengths and build on the fact that America's innovation has driven us to a point where we can be the #1 provider of energy in the world. We can, we should, and we will after November.
That's so well said.
There it is.
I know we have a few seconds left, Senator, and hopefully
he's got like 5 minutes
I
still.
mean, this was amazing. One more round of applause. I want for Senator Haggerty.
Oh yeah, they kind of buy some time now. Let's get an applause in there.
Senator, just some final thoughts.
He's the senator from
as it
Tennessee, if you're
relates
just
to
tuning
your
in.
Bitcoin journey and what you could see from the community to support you.
Well, I just say this. I know if you turn on the television, there's so many things that can depress one and make you feel like the nation has gone to hell in a handbasket. But when I look across this audience here today, when I go out and walk the conference halls, what I see is the energy and the enthusiasm and the inspiration that makes America great. And if we think about the innovation and the capacity to lead, it's right here. It's resident at this conference.
I got to be honest,
guys.
I'm
I'm more
just happy
proud
to
of
see a
America than I am
politician that's
today sitting here with
pro-crypto.
all of you. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Senator Haggerty, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Right.
That was great.
So there he is.
The Bitcoin conference.
In about 4 minutes, they're going to bring out our Bitcoin savior, who is Michael Saylor. So
let's get Bitcoin 2024 powered by
definitely looking
Bitcoin
forward to
Magazine.
that.
Once again, I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor at Bitcoin Magazine. You just heard a fireside chat
Actually,
with
I haven't heard him
Bill
speak in a
Hagerty,
while.
Republican from Tennessee. We're here back at the live desk.
Yeah, I
with
haven't
a
heard
pro-athlete
any
panel.
new
We've
kind of
got
interviews
Mr.
with Michael
Sean
Saylor
Harris
in a
and
long
Russell
time, so this should be
Okun
interesting for me
hanging out
to
with us here, talking
actually
to everybody
tune in
out
and
on
see what he
X,
has to say.
YouTube, and Rumble. Want to read a couple quotes from the senator just there. Chance to transform our
They just
nation
had,
with Bitcoin. He wants to tap the creative.
Was the Tennessee senator on? He's very pro Bitcoin, obviously a Republican kind of guy. So him and Trump are leading into positive crypto influence on this country. Hopefully Kamala will come back, and as she tries to present herself as the candidate of young people, she's trying to be hip and cool. Maybe the Democrats will change their mindset on crypto, which would be really great to see everybody be positive on crypto, and then it's not so much a political issue.
We can do that here in the United States because we have such a fast change in who's the president.
Well, of course, Donald J. Trump wanting Bitcoin made in America. You can get these hats at
Bitcoin made in
BitcoinMagazine.com.
America.
Russell, your reaction to hearing a sitting senator
Look at those hats.
speaking so positively about Bitcoin?
Look, as I've been walking around the conference, there are tons of political activists outside, right? And they're all trying to get us to root, right, for whatever candidate. And I guess I would say I don't really care about politics in that way.
Drop out.
Right? Like,
Absolutely.
Surprise.
This guy
Right,
gets
'cause
it. It's not a political
at the end of the
issue.
day,
Well, I mean, it's a political
right,
issue when the
reality
Democrats are
is
trying
that
to
this Bitcoin
do
conference
things that
is
they
going
shouldn't be
to
doing to
bigger than
crypto.
RNC,
But
bigger than
hopefully
the
there's going to be changes.
bigger than the NRA, right? Like all those people are going to come here, Senator Hagerty and all the
Yeah,
like,
imagine
they're going to want to
Bitcoin being
pander to
bigger
this
than the
audience.
NRA.
Why? Because we are
crazy.
becoming the most powerful force in the world, not just the nation, right? We are the last line of defense, the last free-thinking people, right? If I'm a politician, I want those people on my side. Well, we need better terms. We need people who are serious about sovereignty, freedom, proper custody, and freedom of speech. We need to protect code. We need to protect our developers. We need to protect our influencers and the people who are speaking and hanging out with these guys. By the way, shout out to David Bailey. Shout out to David Bailey. Love what he's doing. Love his focus. And let's keep this thing rolling.
Well, of course, the bigger story, the declining dollar. Sean, your sense of to the average
In about
people,
1 minute, they're going to have
understand
Michael
that they're
Saylor come
impacted
out.
by inflation, and this is a failure of the U.S. dollar system that these congressmen are in charge of.
Well, I mean, if you look at just your natural person, right? Our grandparents used to be able to support, one man could support a whole family on a normal job. He could have 8 kids, and that was normal. And then our parents could have a few kids. Nowadays,
with a high school education, even.
Yeah, and
High school
nowadays, if
education.
you have a good education, you have to have dual income to have 2 kids. What about the generation after us? The generation after us, just to support themselves is becoming unmanageable just for the cost of
It's
living
rough out
alone.
here, guys.
And I think that's when
rough
the
out
rubber
here
meets
for
the
sure.
road, and you're seeing that people finally understand it when they can't support themselves. They go, okay, something is wrong, and you're starting to see that. You see a lot of these videos that come up on Twitter or on YouTube that people are finally understanding. I graduated from college, I did what everyone told me to do, and I cannot support myself. And I think that's when it finally clicks, and they go, there has to be something else. And when people start searching, they will eventually come down to where the truth lies, and that's when Bitcoin clicks for most people, is when it solves a problem that you have. And that's what's done for us 3 up here. It's solved a problem for us in a different way, and it's going to keep solving different problems for different people, and as it does, then more people will understand it and will want Bitcoin.
But I think the meta question here from the politician is, can it solve the dollar, right? Or is the dollar just on its decline, Bitcoin on the rise? Russell, how do you see it?
Yeah, I am the type to believe solely in the Bitcoin economy. I love ordinals. I love inscriptions.
It's about time to bring Michael Saylor out. They got to probably prep the Nakamoto stage.
That is ultimately how we should all be thinking. Right? I cannot control the dollar situation. I cannot control financial policy and monetary policy. I cannot speak to that. A politician can get up there and say all these type of things, and Larry Fink can show up. And
so your adoption by any means necessary?
Adoption by any means necessary, particularly in Bitcoin. We want the Bitcoin humanity. We want the Bitcoin economy. Why? Because it's going to usher forward a whole new humanity, a different way of collaborating and a different way of thinking.
Sean, adoption by any means necessary. Your quick take.
No, I'm not for adoption by any means necessary. I'm not. I would disagree.
This is
with
so
Russell
much
on
better
this
than
one.
some of
I'm
the
not for
past
ordinals,
Bitcoin
but,
conferences that I've
look,
listened
I'm about
to.
the
It's
monetary policy.
definitely
That's
more
where-
professional
that's
this time
where the
around.
difference is for me, is the
I've seen some
monetary
bad
policy that
Bitcoin
everyone knows
conferences.
what is Bitcoin, and it's predictable, right? We have 10 guys that can make a decision in the back room in DC about the cost of money, about the price of money, and how it flows, and if it stops. Quantitative easing, quantitative tightening. With Bitcoin, it's a predictable monetary policy. We all know the rules to the game, and no one can change those rules. I played basketball for years. If someone changed the rules of basketball in the middle of a game, I would be so upset because they call it travel and I'm not traveling. And that's what happens, right? The guys in GME that were doing these, the short squeeze back in the day, and then all of a sudden Robinhood just turns it off and they say you can't buy this anymore. The same thing happens, right? In Canada, they can turn off your bank account. And so for me, I want money that's predictable. I want to know the rules, and I want money that doesn't debase my wealth. And that's what Bitcoin provides
Sean,
for me.
why support the ETFs? Why not ordinals? Why not any means necessary? Any way to get people off the U.S. dollar standard that's failing?
Because I think some people can sometimes they go down a certain way and can get burned, and that can get them disillusioned to what it really is offering. If someone thinks that if they think that an ETF is Bitcoin, and then they realize that there's a 6102 that happens, then that's actually was never their Bitcoin. It was an IOU to their Bitcoin. And
I understand
so
what this guy's saying, but if you're an older person, you're probably not going to want to custody your own Bitcoin. So it's good to have an option as an ETF just for other people to get into Bitcoin.
That brings them down to the rabbit hole, and then they really.
Am I personally going to buy a Bitcoin ETF? No, I definitely don't think so.
CEO of MicroStrategy was taking the stage for a keynote. Guys, want to talk about Michael and what he's doing, amassing 200,000 plus Bitcoin. Quick thoughts on what he might say to the Bitcoin community. Is there anything left he can do for us, having amassed that stash and promoting it as he is?
Well, look, ultimately, I think Michael has been incredible for the Bitcoin environment. Right, he has been serious about things from an institutional level. But again, it's us. Right, he is simply just a node on the network. He is one person. Right, and what I want us to see, people in Bitcoin say, is we can make this same type of change. We can affect how people think. We can affect our families independently. Right, so there's no savior that's coming. There's no politician that's going to come and save us. Right, but we have code. We have each other. Right, so I'm looking forward to what he says. But
I like this guy. He's not too bad.
Heading now to the Nakamoto stage,
he's an
Michael
athlete.
Saylor, chairman of MicroStrategy. Stay with us.
A city known for
Okay,
freedom.
so now we got Michael Saylor out here, Bitcoin 2024, ready to hear what he has to say.
Today, I've decided to use slides.
All right, PowerPoint,
And
let's
for
go.
those of you who've seen my presentation, some are with slides, some are without slides. I got a lot of good comments on the ones with slides, and so I figured the best way to make this presentation better was more slides.
I haven't heard this guy
So,
speak for a good
number go
year. I'm interested in
And
what
with,
he has to say
with
this time around.
No more delay. I want to talk about the Bitcoin revolution. And I also want to talk about rebuilding our global economy with digital capital.
Okay.
The world, as we know it, is based on 20th century ideas and 20th century technology. Stocks trade 9:30 to 4 unless there's a bank holiday. You can't do things on the weekend. Everything is slow.
But not
Everything
crypto.
is expensive. If we want to prosper in the 21st century, we need new ideas, and they need to be based on new technology. This chart you've seen before, I popped it up. It's $900 trillion of global wealth. It's that $900 trillion, it's spread across physical assets and financial assets that are 20th century ideas, 20th century technology. And in the upper left corner is a little orange blip, the little orange asset that could, what we call Bitcoin. It's $1 trillion. It seems like a lot if you started with zero, but when you look at it against the greater scheme of things in the world, it's 0.1%.
Very tiny.
Here's another way to see that same chart. It's not 900 trillion of assets. It's a bunch of assets held for their utility value and a bunch of assets held as a store of value, long-term capital. When I buy a house, I want to live in it. But when I buy a bunch of bonds, I just put my money there because I didn't know what else to do with the money. And when you start to see the world as a big chunk of long-term capital, $450 trillion or more of capital, and you start to think about the way we store that capital, you see the engine for the revolution. The global economy struggles because we're relying upon imperfect assets and imperfect systems to store that capital. It's crippling our capital preservation. So how do we engineer a better system? Well, this is Tesla, and Tesla had a quote. He said, you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Those numbers really do put things in perspective. When you think at its peak,
now.
the cryptocurrency market was only like $2 trillion.
Energy is money, or capital, or wealth. You could use them interchangeably for this speech. Frequency is about the duration or the lifespan. How long will it take? A minute, an hour, a year, a century? And we vibrate money every time we trade with each other, or we transfer from one locale to another, or we transform a property into another type of asset. And so here is an important equation. This is useful life is equal to the value of an asset divided by the cost to maintain that asset. If you're looking for the useful life of your money in an asset, then the way to figure it out is ask, how much does it cost every year to maintain that asset in pristine condition? What do I have to spend in order to avoid depreciation or decay? It turns out that useful life, is very close to something we know in the Bitcoin community as stock to flow. They're very related if you're measuring them in years. Many individuals and most corporations, they use financial assets to preserve capital. And this is the source of a challenge for us. Let's talk about financial assets. I want to keep my money for a long period of time. Start with $1 billion, put it in the peso, and the money is decaying in 2 years, right? A 98% inflation rate strips you of your economic energy or your capital. This is not a good long-duration asset. The Turkish lira, your capital lasts 3 years. The US dollar, under traditional monetary inflation for the past century, might last 14 years, but it's not like you have it for 14 years. The life is being sucked out of you linearly over the 14 years. Put your money in a hedge fund. What's the annual cost? It's 2% management fee and then 20% of the upside. About 4% a year if you're investing in normal assets. That means it's a 25-year asset. Treasuries, you're going to get a yield, but the 3.5% after-tax yield goes against the 7% monetary inflation. Maybe your money lasts 30 years. Capital in a mutual fund where you pay a 1% fee, 100 years. That's about the best you're going to get. If you manage to buy a diversified portfolio at 10 basis points, the counterparty risk is going to drive you to a 1% cost. So those are your financial assets. We're running the world on a 20th century set of ideas, and on average, a financial asset is going to last you 30 years. We all know inflation dilutes the value of financial assets. But inflation is just the tip of the iceberg. You're also going to get diluted by tariffs and tolls and torts and transfers, taxes. We got all sorts of taxes: income tax, capital gains tax.
Absolutely.
Every time you vibrate and move the money, you get taxed on the money. And then if the taxes don't take you and the torts don't undo you, you've got weather and competition and obsolescence and politics and catastrophe. Those are the things that dilute the value of your capital over time. And if you want to maintain economic energy, you have to fight against that friction. Well, most people realize that's a frustrating endeavor and it's a no-win endeavor, so they give up on financial assets and they start turning to physical assets to preserve capital. Well, here's the physical asset, a Ferrari. Not a good way to keep your money forever, though, because after 5 years, you've spent as much on the insurance and the upkeep and the depreciation as it's worth. Yachts aren't much better. If you spend 10% of your money operating it, you also get hit with depreciation. Don't store your money in yachts. A home in Miami Beach, if you buy a $10 million house, you better come up with $10 million to maintain the house over 17 years. Now you've got no money left. Silver, 22 years. A warehouse, 40 years, maybe 50 years. Bar of gold, 62 years. A painting, 72 years. Land, the average property tax in the United States is 1.1%. That means your money is going to last 91 years unless the government reassesses the value of your property. Then it's going to last less than 91 years.
That's true.
The oldest family ranch in the United States is King Ranch. They made it 173 years. Every other family in the country failed. And here's the longest held property, the Crown Estate in the United Kingdom. You could say the royal family held it since 1066, but on the other hand, it passed from the Plantagenets to the Stuarts, through the Lancasters and the Yorks, and eventually found its way to the Hanover family. And so maybe 7 different families split that. None of them got to take it with them. So physical assets you might think might last 1,000 years. Probably about 50 to 75 years is the best you're going to do. Entropy is diluting the value of your physical assets. It's sucking the capital, the energy out of them. There's a reason it's called earth and not heaven. Because politicians are very creative. They got a city tax, a county tax, a state tax, a federal tax, a transfer tax, a usage tax
on your tax
on
to
the
tax.
property. And if that doesn't get you, there's rent control, price control, or a culture shock.
Yeah, this guy's speaking my language.
Then you got competition. You might get discriminated against. There's recession. The currency can collapse. Your tenants won't pay you.
Yep.
Someone will slip and fall on the front sidewalk and sue you. There's weather, war, crime, and catastrophe. And if energy prices go through the roof, it's going to be hard for you to make a go of it. Physical capital is not a simple solution. Something I learned at MIT, the 3 laws of thermodynamics. You can't win. You can't break even. But you can't get out of the game. So you could stop right here and be a little bit depressed, but then again, we don't want to lose. So you start thinking, what if we could find a way out of the game? Then we could break even. Then you could win. Satoshi found a way.
There we go.
He gave it away. And he went away. And that's Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital capital. That's what he created.
Preach, brother.
Bitcoin's immortal, immutable, and immaterial capital. And I use that in this sense. It's got an infinite lifespan. It's not being attacked by the forces of weather and entropy and inflation. It's immaterial in the sense that it's not in the physical world. It's not suffering from all of those parade of horribles that are the scourge of financial and physical assets. And it is the solution to our economic dilemma.
He is wrong about that.
The transformation of our capital from financial and physical assets to digital assets, it solves the problem that we're all facing. Now, how long-lived is Bitcoin? Well, take your Bitcoin and put it at scale with a custodian, an institutional-grade custodian. You pay 10 basis points. By the first law of money, that means you're going to last 1,000 years. The custodian might not last 1,000 years, but that doesn't matter because you can move the Bitcoin every year or every decade, and you can stay one step ahead of the custodians failing. You can't teleport a building. You can't teleport the King Ranch. And so Bitcoin is that thing that you can move. Say you custody your Bitcoin. You can self-custody your Bitcoin for about 1 basis point a year, assuming you buy good
for 10,000
hardware
years.
wallets and signing devices and spend a day a year to keep track of it. Now you've got a 10,000-year asset. And what happens if you give it to the AI? Well, an AI or a computer program can maintain those private keys for the cost of electricity. You've got a 100,000-year asset.
What's going on, Code?
The AIs are going to want the Bitcoin. If they have a choice between owning the Bitcoin
Are you a Michael
and
Saylor
owning
fan?
the ranch in Texas or owning the
shut
bar
up, Boomer. You don't like Michael
or
Saylor?
owning the Argentine peso, it's pretty
He's
obvious
not giving
what they're going
Boomer
to want.
advice.
And
He's
you
talking
can
about
see here
Bitcoin.
why they're going to want it. Digital
Boomer
assets
doesn't
are a
understand
class
shit.
all their own.
I don't know, man. He's pretty
When
smart.
you compare them to all the other assets that you can use for capital preservation, you can see they're off the scale. Everything else is living in the domain of 30, 40, 50
Making
years,
fallacies.
and you're in the domain of 1,000 to 100,000 years. It's a breakthrough in capital preservation, but it makes it a revolution in economics. If you would be rich, trade wisely. And here's a very simple principle. Trade temporary for permanent. Trade your ice cream cone that's melting for the peso for the dollar for the land, and the land for the Bitcoin. Trade the currency for capital. Trade something fragile for something resilient. Trade something local for something global. Trade something physical for something digital. Trade the security for the commodity. Trade the commodity for the scarcity. You can't go wrong moving in that direction. So let's talk about some great trades in history, some trillion-dollar trades.
Michael Saylor has done a ton for the Bitcoin space.
The
Absolutely
Dutch
agree.
understood naval power.
I'm a fan of Michael
they
Saylor. I like him.
They had thousands of them. They bought the best port in the New World for a couple of $100 in plastic and textile trinkets. And that's worth $2.5 trillion today. Okay? It was an investment that's returned 6% for 398 years straight. It's a 10.5 billion X return. And if you think about it, you're like, why would I actually give up the best port in America for a bunch of textiles and plastic and glass? But the people that sold the thing to them didn't understand naval power. If you don't appreciate the reason you're going to want the property, you won't value the property. Napoleon wanted to gallivant across the old world, and Jefferson wanted to expand in the new world. So France sells Louisiana to the U.S. for $15 million in 1803.
By definition of having a computer, he is wrong. You can't.
The $15 million probably lasted a few months fueling the French army. It's gone.
Davis never happened.
Jefferson got that. He got 27%.
More
of the
equating
United
it to a
States.
network of computers. I guess if you said all of the computers in the world somehow disappeared, Bitcoin wouldn't be around, then maybe you'd be right.
Jefferson had some vision.
But it wouldn't just be a single
As
computer.
did this man. Seward paid $7 million for Alaska 2 years after the country's decimated by the Civil War. John D. Rockefeller was trying to start an oil company. Today, there's $1 trillion of oil underneath Alaska. It's a massive return for a piece of paper. How much is digital capital worth? Take the $450 trillion, multiply by 3%. That's your entropy cost or your inflation cost. It costs the world $13.5 billion a year to take all of those parade of horribles when they're trying to preserve their wealth. If you put a 20 P to E on it, like you'd value a company or a long duration bond, that's worth $270 trillion. So digital capital is worth 10, 20, 15 trillion a year, and it's worth hundreds of trillions of dollars. Reality check. Is he full of BS? Well, digital capital is returning 55% for the past 4 years. Financial capital, the best in the world, is the bond. It's minus 5%. Imagine capitalizing your company or your country on a minus 5% instead of a plus 55%. It's obviously working. And now let's come back to my chart here. Global wealth, we can look at it like this, and we see the little Bitcoin, square in the left corner. But what's happening? Here's my macro Bitcoin forecast. It's 21 years. Goes out to the year 2045. What do I think will happen? Well, I've got a bear case and a bull case, but what I think will happen is that 55% ARR goes to 50%, 45, 40, 35, 30, 25, 20. It's between 50 and 20. It'll gradually decelerate till it's growing about twice as fast as the S&P index. And at that rate, Bitcoin's $13 million a coin in the year 2045. 13 million. It could be a 3 million bear case. It could be a 49 million bull case. But what is Bitcoin? 7% of the world's assets then. What about the rest of the assets? Well, I actually think that AIs and technology are going to revolutionize tech. We had no companies worth $1 trillion. Then we had a bunch of $1 trillion companies. You're going to see more because you're going to see companies with 100,000 AIs and no employees, and they're going to do the work of companies that used to have 100,000 employees. You're going to see mega corps develop, shipping robots and self-driving cars, and a company that gives a personal physician to 1 billion people without any doctors on the payroll. So clearly, equity is going to grow fast. Gold's going to get demonetized.
Just looking at the schedule.
Land will be less monetized. But look, here's the future in
Kathy
2045.
Wood of
Doesn't
ARK
look that
Invest is coming out
revolutionary.
next
It
to
looks
talk
like
about
today. It's just that
Bitcoin and macro
Bitcoin is visible
investment
on the chart
trends.
to you. When Bitcoin is visible, that's going to be the base case. Now, what are the implications of this? How do you make money? Well, let's talk about individual Bitcoin strategy. What should you do? Make Bitcoin your primary treasury asset. Convert your excess earnings to Bitcoin. Utilize subsidized credit. If the government will loan you money, borrow the money at cheap rates and buy Bitcoin, and find a tax-efficient way to invest the Bitcoin. What shouldn't you do? Don't quit your day job. Don't lose your focus on Bitcoin. Don't use margin loans and trade with leverage. You get wiped out while you're asleep on a Saturday night. That's not good. Good? 30-year loan for 3% backed by the government on your land. Bad? Overnight 10x leverage. So what's a typical person? Well, we actually model an individual, and we said, what if you had $750,000 in net assets, and you made 200 grand a year, and you're going to make 5% more every year, and you got a savings rate of 25%, and you can invest $50,000 a year. Well, there's a lot of strategies. You could be the normie and do a normal strategy, diversified portfolio. You can be a 10%er, and you can put 10% of your assets into Bitcoin.
I don't think you should be 100% in Bitcoin.
You can be a BTC maxi and put 80% of your assets and put 80% of your earnings into Bitcoin.
If that's the point he's trying to make.
You could be a double maxi, and that's when you basically take an extra $250,000 loan against the house. And then the triple maxi is you finance the house for Bitcoin, you buy Bitcoin, you flip all your assets to Bitcoin, and then you move to a cheap tax jurisdiction where you actually can avoid some taxes and invest an extra 50 grand in Bitcoin, maybe a Singapore or UAE or something. What's the result? Well, this is the result. The normie ends up with $8 million in 21 years. The 10%er will more than double that. The maxi ends up with 100 million. The double maxi 150, the triple maxi 214 million. You can see the power of leverage, and the choice is yours. And you can also see, it takes 15.9 Bitcoin to be a triple maxi. 6.25 Bitcoin will make you a wealthy person. Let's talk about corporations. Dues. Convert your capital to BTC. Convert your cash flows to BTC. Issue equity to buy BTC when it's accretive. Issue debt to buy BTC when it's accretive. Don'ts. Don't bleed your capital with taxable dividends. Don't surrender your capital with stock buybacks. Don't dilute your shareholders with risky, overpriced M&A activity.
I am not giving you financial advice to invest in Bitcoin.
Here's our typical corporation. $100 million of cash flow, $1 billion of enterprise value. It's growing. It's generating a lot of cash flow. Its share price is $100. And now the issue is, what's your strategy? Normie? Maxi, double maxi, triple maxi.
That is a decision that you have to make for yourself.
Well, the normie's going to be okay. You'll have a $1,200 stock price.
Even his advice here, when he's saying that you should,
doubles it.
Take out a reverse mortgage on your house and invest in Bitcoin, I think that's a little bit insane. I wouldn't ever suggest something like that.
The triple maxi's $28,000. What
figure
kind
if you
of company
put
do you want to run?
10% of your net worth in Bitcoin, it holds
Reality
for 10 years.
check.
In 10 years, your BTC
This
will
is
be
a triple maxi
80%,
strategy at work right now. This is micro strategy.
Yeah, 10%. That's probably a good strategy if you want to go with that. Yeah.
It will be 48 months on August 10th of this year since we started down this road. 48 months. And
you go with what you're comfortable with.
If you're running a company,
if 10% is what you're comfortable with, go for it, man. But I would never tell you how much to invest in Bitcoin. I do not give it financial advice at all.
Then good for you. You can get to a 20 to 25% ARR. If you want to copy NVIDIA, you will beat everybody. But I think that right now in the boardrooms of Microsoft and Apple and Google and Tesla, they're stressed out about copying NVIDIA. And the irony is,
that's
easy
the Paul.
to copy MicroStrategy.
Paul was saying he thinks people should invest 10%.
It's simple.
If he's comfortable with 10%, that's what he thinks is great, then by all means go with it. But I wouldn't give a number.
This is how it compounds over 4 years. Right? 4 years of doing that gets you to a 1,300% improvement. So, bottom line, build a strong capital structure, avoid dilutive financial practices. Let's talk about an institution. You got a church, a charity, an endowment of Harvard, any nonprofit. What should you do? Modify your charter to invest in BTC. Reallocate from short-term duration assets to long-duration assets. You wouldn't invest in ice cream cones. Don't invest in the peso, but why are you holding 20-year financial instruments? Don't own 50-year physical land instruments. Buy a 1,000-year instrument. Use BTC. BTC is the cost of capital.
Because even there he's saying use BTC rather than the S&P.
The S&P is 13%. BTC is 55%.
I don't know if I agree with that. I like Bitcoin,
Think of 55%.
but I don't know if I would
that's your
tell
cost
people
of capital.
to not use
and then
the
use
S&P and go
intelligent
full
leverage.
into Bitcoin. That's a little bit high
here's
risk
our
for
model,
even
a
me.
$1 billion portfolio. You want to be a normie, a maxi, a triple maxi. Here, at the maxi, we just said put 100% in, the double maxi, and triple maxi is take 10% leverage. And that's what happens.
I don't know what you mean by that. Why should you
start
listen
with
to him? I'm not telling you you should listen to him.
And in 21 years, you'll have $5 billion of your normie, and you'll be patting yourself on the back,
listening to him and
what
his
a good
ideas.
job you've done managing the endowment. But it could have been 300 billion. It could have been 100x. Not that hard, very straightforward. Now let's talk about wealth of nations. This is the interesting one. What's the national Bitcoin strategy? Do's and don'ts. Well,
Because the people who talk
reallocate your
during-
treasury from gold
during
and
complete
bonds, their
would
short
disagree with this.
duration assets, to a
and that's
10,000-year
okay if
asset.
they disagree.
Issue
That's fine,
currency
too.
to buy Bitcoin, issue debt to buy the Bitcoin, encourage Bitcoin ownership with favorable laws, protect self-custody for individuals and corporations, and support integration with the banking system of your country. Those are all do's. The don't pursue policies hostile to Bitcoin and Bitcoin holders.
That's where the Republicans are coming out.
This one's not complicated. Now, let's say you're an indebted country. You're actually in debt. You're running a deficit. I could name these countries, but I won't. I'm just going to say you owe a lot of money and you're struggling. Your interest rates are high and you don't know what to do. Well, here's your strategies. Are you a normie or a 10%er or a maxi, double maxi, or triple maxi? The maxi is you put a third of your treasury into this. A double maxi is 65%.
I'm waiting for him to come out
And
and
a
say
triple maxi is put
for
all your
people to
treasury
be
into it
triple
and start
maxis.
issuing debt. For those of you who can actually read, right, the subtext of this is the first country to buy Bitcoin by issuing its own currency wins. This is simple. You print paper. Remember that Seward check? You issue the check. You'd be like, well, you know, you could whine, oh, we couldn't afford it. You know, it was 2 years after the Civil War. The country was bankrupt.
he's
Millions
actually
of
going
people are
over his
dead.
time.
The South is in disrepair.
Is-
The North is angry. And this guy,
Kathy Wood was supposed to
Seward,
take the
comes up with
stage
an
at
idea to buy
2:30.
frozen tundra, a lot of it, from a bunch of Russians that wanted the paper. Okay? So people have done things under worse situations. But you can see here the normie strategy is you owe $3 trillion. You're not getting anywhere. The maxi strategy pays off your debt. The double maxi strategy makes you rich. The triple maxi strategy makes you very rich. Why? Because you're buying the property that everybody is running to in 100 years, and you just go buy it now. Like, Standard Oil was nothing. There was no gasoline. There were no automobiles. We had no diesel locomotives in 1867. We invented all that stuff, but common sense says, oh, I can buy something that's equal to about 1/5 of the size of the nation for a few dollars. Why don't I just grab it? Bitcoin strategy for wealthy foreign countries.
Hey, what's up?
Let's
I'm
say you have a
curious.
lot of money. You know, maybe you're Saudi
play
Arabia or
D&D?
Norway, and you make a lot of money.
I've never actually played D&D, to be honest.
Well, what's your
I
strategy?
had a lot of friends that
You want to
played
be a
D&D.
normie, a
It
maxi,
seems like fun.
a double maxi? A maxi puts 25% of their money into Bitcoin. A triple maxi goes 75%.
Probably not now.
And converts
I don't
their
get a lot of time on my
surpluses into
hands.
Bitcoin.
But it is interesting. It does interest me. It could be fun.
Here's what happens. You just get insanely rich. $58 trillion of rich. But, you know, more than that, this strengthens your national security.
I was looking at Baldur's
because you
Gate
end up
at one
with
point. I guess that's based off of
$50
D&D,
trillion
but I never actually
or
bought
more
it.
of digital capital nobody can take. You know, they can't steal it, right?
Again, it
they
looks
bomb
fun.
your country, they invade your border. They're not getting the Bitcoin, right? So this is good for your financial security and your national security. But note, if you are Saudi Arabia or Norway, and if you pursue the triple maxi strategy, Saylor says it's very easy to do, but
Would a
it's
Star Wars
4.2
Evil D&D
million
campaign maybe
Bitcoin you
interest
end up
to
with
join?
at the end of that line.
It's a political
That means there's not a
strategy
lot of
theme.
room for triple maxis.
Probably not
at the
right
nation state level.
anytime soon.
Right?
I don't
There's
have a
gonna
whole
be
lot of time on my
one.
hands.
There might be two. At some point, right, this is an opportunity for an aggressive mover. You can have a lot of triple maxi families and a lot of triple maxi corporations.
Thanks for the
Not a lot
subscribe
of
there.
room for triple maxi nations. And let's look at the U.S. U.S. is a special case. Well, the rules are still the same, right? Buy Bitcoin, sell the paper, get rid of your gold, go long range. And the don'ts are still the same. Don't harass the Bitcoiners.
There it is.
Don't
Reallocate
send
treasury
the
from
industry
gold bonds to
overseas. Don't
Bitcoin.
send the
I knew that was
capital
coming.
overseas. But what's our base case here? Well, we think that AI and new technology is going to drive growth. I mean, I'm going to assume that the United States is going to be run by competent executives, and they're going to harness technology, and we're going to actually take advantage of AI, and we're going to create robot cars and robots and billion-person websites that give you free accounting and legal and medical advice, and all that's going to grow our revenues faster than grows our expenses, and we'll eventually get to the point where interest rates come down. But the question is, what's the United States Bitcoin strategy?
Yeah, he was only booked for half an hour.
You could be a 10%er. That's kind of like buying
whatever, though.
500,000 Bitcoin. You could buy 1 million Bitcoin. A double maxi is 2 million Bitcoin. A triple maxi is buy 4 million Bitcoin. And then start sweeping the surplus of the nation when it comes into Bitcoin. And the consequences? Well, if you're a normie, and you have great productivity growth and brilliant technology and the robots do all the work for us, you're still going to be in debt. It just won't get much worse. I mean, that'll save us. We need that. If you're a maxi, you'll pay off half the debt. If you're a double maxi, you got a surplus. And if you're a triple maxi, instead of owing 30 trillion, the nation has 30 trillion. Right? Bitcoin is not the solution to all our problems. It is the solution to half our problems. And the important point is the other half are very complicated. They'll take a lot of people and energy. This half is simple. This is a very simple thing to solve half our problems. So Bitcoin is cyber Manhattan. Hundreds of trillions of dollars of capital are going to go there. We're going to demonetize Russian tundra and Chinese real estate and everything in Africa and all of the crappy buildings. Everything anybody bought that they didn't need, it's getting demonetized. You buy a Bitcoin, you owe a building. Otherwise, a boulevard, otherwise the entire neighborhood. It's only 276 to the third. That's what you're looking at right now. And I'm going to leave you with one quote. Satoshi Nakamoto kicked off the Bitcoin network January 3rd, 2009.
Think the same way. That
on
becomes a
January
self-fulfilling prophecy.
17th of 2009, 14 days later, 16 months before Pizza Day, when Bitcoin was worth nothing, and it was not going to be worth anything for a year, Satoshi Nakamoto said it might make sense just to get some in case it catches on. If enough people think the same way, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And never have wiser words been spoken. You're staring at $1 trillion of proof, but there's still 1,000x to come, and you have a lot more information at your fingertips. The writing is on the wall. Bitcoin is the future of capital. It's the future of money. It might make sense to get some because it has caught on. Thank you.
All right, so there is Michael Saylor. He definitely went 10 minutes over, but Kathy Wood is coming out next. I'm going to run to the restroom, and they're probably going to do some commercials, so no biggie. I'm going to leave it running.
Welcome back to the Mara News Desk at Bitcoin 2024, powered by Bitcoin Magazine. Once again, I'm your host, Pete Rizzo, editor of Bitcoin Magazine. You just saw MicroStrategy Chairman Michael Saylor, quote, not a long-duration asset. Don't surrender your capital. His plea, the life is being sucked out of you. He showed a bunch of charts talking about corporates going a double, triple, maxi. His plea, the U.S. should buy 4 million Bitcoin. Bitcoin is cyber Manhattan. We're taking over all the asset classes. Going to throw it to the panel. Where do we start with this? And what do we think of the plea? U.S. should buy 4 million Bitcoin. Sounds good, right?
Cyber Manhattan. Super cool. right?
You live in regular Manhattan. So
I'm in
that's
regular
not- yeah,
Manhattan.
that's-
I'm in like pleb Manhattan, down in Tribeca. Old buildings, Chinese building is.
Well, let's stick
you know,
with
Sailor was
4
saying.
million Bitcoin, right? This is a big, he's putting a specific number on this vision. There's only 21 million Bitcoin, right? So he's really saying the U.S. should own almost 20% of the Bitcoin supply. Thomas, your reaction?
Yeah, that's 3 like Mirsu Papa shoes, right? 3 or 4, depending on.
Of course, you're referring to the old-time
it's
Bitcoiner
counted.
there, but is that, Aubrey, your take on this number? What do you think?
Look, this was Michael Saylor's magnum opus. I think he came out here, and we're going to hear from RFK later today. We're going to hear from other candidates, and so Trump speaks tomorrow. I think he's sending a message to the politicians. He's talking about how Bitcoin can solve a problem. He said Bitcoin doesn't solve all our problems, but it solves half of our problems. You heard him say that. And now the question goes to individuals. It goes to governments about where do you qualify as a maxi? So the question to everyone is, how much of a maxi do you want to be?
Everett, independent journalist, your take. Who's Saylor speaking to when he gives the speech?
So Saylor is speaking to everyone. And as you can see, I'm a fan. I think that was a perfect foreplay for the politicians that we're going to be seeing later today and tomorrow. Yeah. So he really set the stage for them
but
to
we worried,
make that announcement.
Do we even, as Americans, would we even want the United States to own 4 million Bitcoin? As long-term Bitcoiners, Thomas Bacchia, owner of PubKey, going to throw it back to you. Do you want the U.S. to own 4 million Bitcoin?
They have 200,000
Paul
now, right? They've
says
had much more in the past.
One
They sell
Bitcoin
it out,
equals one
right?
Bitcoin.
They're the cleanest
I
coins you can
love
buy.
Bitcoin.
Those aren't opinions. Or do you want the United States to own 4 million Bitcoin?
No, not really.
Paul, what do you think about
I
Republicans
don't really want that,
Okay.
but if I had a
taking hold of
preference government
cryptocurrency?
owning that much
We're
Bitcoin,
going to be
I
right
would
What do you
back,
think about
after
Republicans
this.
being
We're
the
gonna go to our
champions
roving
of
camera live on
Bitcoin?
the floor. Stay
And
with
how it
us on
seems
the-
Democrats
Mara,
are now the people who
Thanks,
are moving
Rizzo.
away
I'm
from
coming to you guys
cryptocurrencies.
live from the Genesis stage in the Expo Hall. The Expo Hall actually has 3 different stages, open sourced all the way in the back right, as well as the mining stage in the back left. This line continues to wrap around fully around the Expo Hall. Senator Tim Scott just told us, look, I was blown away, was not expecting this. This conference has gone off the charts. Back to you at the desk, Rizzo.
We're back at the Mara News Desk at Bitcoin 2024 here in Nashville, Tennessee, speaking with an all-star panel here. Efrat Fennington, independent journalist, Aubrey Strobel, advisor at Trust Massachusetts, and Thomas Bacchia, owner of PubKey. We're reacting to Michael
Paul
Saylor's
says, I think
speech,
Republicans
double,
will
triple,
keep
maxi.
taxes
Really, he's giving
lower.
people a guide, an
Potentially,
adoption
yes.
grade into Bitcoin. Efrat, your take on
What if Trump comes out at the end of this and he says,
it's right.
we're not going to tax
Everyone
Bitcoin?
Bitcoin. I
The
think
same
the
way that
way
he's
he phrased
running
it,
with
the normie,
not
the double,
taxing
the
waitresses
triple,
on their
everyone can
tips.
own it. The
What if he
question
just
is
comes
how
out and
much
he's
do
like,
you
yeah, we're
afford
just not
it
going to tax
and
crypto?
Whether it's feasible for everyone. I think that what
Or
he's hinting to
do
the
you think he
government
has any
is a
kind
bit
of
of a-
announcement?
is a bit
At
of
the
a
end of this
push, and it's
conference,
a
he's
bit
going
of
to be the
tough play
keynote
for us
speaker,
to-
right?
Well, we
He's
got
going to
in the
come
chat
out.
here on
You would think he's
YouTube,
going to have
calls
some
for
kind of
Saylor to take a
information.
US
What do
Treasury
you think he's going to
position
say?
Potentially in the Trump administration.
I don't know if they really
Multiple
care
comments
about
calling for that.
Bitcoin.
Aubrey, Thomas,
Yeah,
is
I would
this,
agree with
reasonable?
you. They probably don't
I mean,
really
they're talking
care
about
about
who? Diamond,
Bitcoin, but
Fink.
I
Maybe
know.
Vivek is in the
just to be in a
conversation.
position where these
I
people
think
are
it
actually
would
coming
be
out to these
interesting
Bitcoin
to throw
conferences
Saylor
now
into the
is
mix, but,
completely
it would be an unlikely choice. I think it's a
different.
long odds.
You know, it's weird.
Aubrey?
I think Saylor has a
I
company
specifically
to run. I
remember
don't think
Hillary
he's
Clinton
I don't
saying
think
this
he
is
wants to
magical
get
internet
political.
money, and now you
Just- I know
have
Saylor and
literally,
I know
like, I'm looking
that,
at the
you know, he's
agenda,
open to meeting
and
with
it's
people,
a
but I don't
bunch
think he's
of
going to
different
take a side in
senators
any
and congressmen and
Well,
just
the die is cast, and he's put
former
out the call.
president.
The United States government buy
A,
4 million
RFK
Bitcoin. The plan remains to be seen.
is,
We're going to throw it back to the main
actually
stage
gonna be
now
here
to hear about
too,
Bitcoin and macro investment
running on the
trends with
Libertarian
Kathy
Party.
Wood of
If he's still
Ark
running, I don't even know if
moderated
he's still
by Elise
running
Galena from
anymore.
Still Mark. We'll be right back at the Mara News Desk.
Just said really won't matter
There we go.
much, although we think.
So here we have Kathy Wood of ARK Invest at the Bitcoin 2024 conference. She kind of had Saylor cut into her time, I believe about 15 minutes, and she's only scheduled to speak for about half an hour. So we'll see what she has to say.
For one stock that is a massive convergence opportunity. Many people analyze Tesla as an auto company, and yet we believe at ARK that it is actually the convergence among robotics, so autonomous taxi networks, robots, are going to be a very big part of the equation. Energy storage, they will be electric, and artificial intelligence, creating explosive growth opportunities. So the reason for that is each one of these technologies is following an S-curve. And when you have them converging, they're going to start feeding one another and creating incredible growth opportunities. And I think what we're here to do today is to talk about convergence involving Bitcoin. And I would say one reason that we've seen the price appreciation recently is the recognition more and more. There's a lot of education taking place, especially 11 ETFs issued at the same time. You've got 11 asset managers out there educating as many people as possible. And what are we saying to them to make this understandable? We're saying that Bitcoin is 3 very big ideas in one. It's a technology, right? But if you think about it, it's leveraging off the internet. It's the layer of the internet that developers didn't put in place in the early 90s because they never dreamed that financial services or commerce would take place on the internet. So it's simply the next generation of the internet. It is a monetary system, the first global, decentralized, private, no government oversight, no throat to choke, digital, rules-based, that's extremely important, monetary system in history. So there's tech, there's economics, and then the third thing, and this we brought to light with the ETF issuance, is it is a new asset class. And every asset manager, retail or institutional, has to consider putting a new asset class in their clients' portfolios. Why? Because of the low correlation of returns. What that means, you slot some Bitcoin in, and your return per unit of risk goes up. And every institution knows that, and so they have a responsibility to understand what Bitcoin is and what kind of investment opportunity it will represent for their clients. So I think that ETF issuance has really helped cement this story and is beginning to generate a deeper understanding more broadly in the investment world.
It certainly has, and I think that positions Bitcoin well to also be represented in other macro trends that asset allocators are attending to. You mentioned AI when you spoke about Tesla. And one of the things that we're hearing from asset allocators is that they're interested in investing in AI and LLM infrastructure. And you mentioned in what you just summarized that that Bitcoin, one of the things that Bitcoin technologies can do is fill a gap for payments on the web. Bitcoin can uniquely do that. But beyond that, what we expect to see in AI and the LLM space is an even higher demand for payments and a demand for micropayments at scale. And what's interesting about that is that that's an area where traditional financial systems aren't optimized for. And beyond that, in the crypto space, it's only Lightning, because of its architecture as a payment channel network, that can reach that sort of transaction volume, the TPS, transactions per second, that will be required in a web-based world or in a world where AI and LLMs are serving the needs of users and of enterprise. And so Bitcoin technologies have a role to play here. And for investors looking to invest in AI and LLM infrastructure, they have to think about what payments match the opportunity of the capabilities that those technologies introduce. And Lightning can do that. And so we're seeing Lightning mature as a payments technology at a moment where it's also applicable to a large macro trend.
Sure,
This
and
is
I'll follow
Alice
up on
Killing.
AI.
She's the founder and manager of
What's going on in
Stillmark.
AI is amazing. We have been very aggressive in our expectations, and yet we're seeing, and Mark Zuckerberg this week talked about open source models and how this might accelerate many of the trends that AI has already triggered. And so I think what we're going to see is a couple of things. One, and we've learned this from the Lightning Network and some of the developers working on it, in Africa, I don't know if you know roast beef, but he's one of them. We did a brainstorm. We do a Bitcoin brainstorm every month in conjunction with Bitcoin Park. And he was on one of the first of them, so look that up. It's every time I am with the developers or the miners or some part of the Bitcoin ecosystem, my confidence in what is about to happen here increases. Well, roast beef, at one of the first two of those brainstorms, sitting in Africa, was saying, this is transforming lives in Africa. It is going to redefine the division of labor. We think we understand the gig economy. Think micro gig economy, and think global labor force and piecemealing out these tasks. So he says this is transforming people's lives in Africa. And so I think the payments part of this is critical.
Yes.
And I also think the second part, so division of labor and paying for those micro giga jobs,
yes,
is one example. And then there's the machine to machine. Basically, it's called agentic AI. I will basically direct an LLM to create a marketing program for me and my new company, including a website, a marketing program, articles, promotional materials, and so forth. And the agentic AI will do that from beginning to end when we finally get there. And we're getting there faster than I thought we were going to get there. So how does this happen? How do we pay all of the various entities involved? Lightning Network, Bitcoin, payments ecosystem.
Great. So let's drill down there for a second on the technologies that will underlie this payments opportunity. You mentioned two of Stillmark's portfolio companies in what you just said. So Roast Beef Lalu is CTO of Lightning Labs. Lightning Labs, of course, just announced this week the introduction of a new protocol, Taproot Assets, which brings stablecoins, digital dollars to Lightning Network to have them transact free in a dependable way and instantly in a peer-to-peer manner. You also talked about LLM-driven agents or LLM-supported agents and their future need to be able to transact both with one another, to purchase resources for themselves, like access to another model or to a data pool, but also to engage with an audience, yes, or a person on the other end. And Lightning Network can facilitate those agents having a wallet. One of our portfolio companies, Vita, is doing exactly that. It's entrepreneurs from the telecom space that recognize the convergence of what's happening in AI, what's happening in Bitcoin, and the opportunity in the telecom sphere. But drilling down for a second on the technology and why it's suitable for an opportunity of this scale, let's talk about the unique architecture of Bitcoin's Lightning Network. So Bitcoin's Lightning Network is a payment channel network. And what that means is that it's a hub and spoke model. So it doesn't, and there's two special things about this hub and spoke model that differentiate it in terms of scalability from other crypto L2 payment solutions. First is that transactions that are happening on the Lightning Network don't need to be committed back to the main chain, the underlying Bitcoin protocol. And what that means is that they are not constrained by block space. Second, they don't require a global state of transactions across the Lightning Network. And that also means that they're able to achieve incredible transaction scale. Now, that's different from other L2 solutions in an important way, in that other L2 payment solutions like ZK rollups do require block space and a global state. And so they can't reach the same sort of transaction volume that Lightning Network can. Now, what was the trade-off? The trade-off, of course, is in the bootstrapping phase that a payment channel network has to go through. So in order for a payment channel network to reach sort of a critical mass, you need to have individuals, hobbyists, dedicated Bitcoiners, to invest their time in running and managing a node, to invest their capital in providing liquidity to the network. And so that's why across the crypto sphere, you see one Lightning Network, although there's dozens or more other L2 payment solutions, including ZK rollups. Now, of course, in addition to Lightning earning this sort of unconstrained scale by taking this hub and spoke approach, it also has created a competitive moat, one Lightning Network across the cryptosphere. And we've seen other payment channel networks like Raiden in the Ethereum space fail because they weren't able to reach that critical point of scale. Now, with this throughput, we have a partner that can be a reliable partner for AI and LLM needs, whether that be for individuals or businesses to pay for access to the models themselves, or whether it be for those models to be in service to businesses and to individual users. You can actually get to a, for example, pay per API call level of discrete monetization.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I'll add, Elise, is that the L402 protocol is critical to this ecosystem because it involves authentication, verification in this payments mechanism. Critically important given how much can go wrong.
Absolutely, and that's another protocol introduced by Lightning Labs. Yes. And so with L402, we're able to have a specific payment technology that addresses the per API call payments opportunity. And we have a partner for AI and LLM infrastructure and use cases that can help, I think, create depth and breadth in what is possible with AI.
Yeah, so I guess just listening to Elise, who's her business, her venture fund is 100% focused on the Bitcoin ecosystem. You can see the depth of knowledge, and I know a lot of people are just thinking, okay, what's the price of Bitcoin going to be? One of the reasons Bitcoin's price will continue to go up is because of the opportunities that Layer 2 Lightning networks and the convergence with AI is going to create. It's going to be phenomenal.
I think so. And Bitcoin's convergence with macro trends and broader technology exploration doesn't just stop with AI and LLMs, of course.
Right.
Macro investors are also talking about and attending to, for example, the energy transition, a movement into renewables. Yes. And Bitcoin fits very well there, both to accelerate what's being built and to stabilize the grid. I know that ARC has spent time in the energy space as well.
Yes, the story there is when Elon Musk, Tesla, put Bitcoin on Tesla's balance sheet, he faced a wall of resistance and criticism having to do
I remember
with the environment. And so we, along with Block, held a half-day seminar featuring Elon and Jack Dorsey, Steve Lee, for those of you who know him. And we were trying to disabuse them of this notion, the critics, that this is environmentally damaging.
I think I remember
that. I'm going to back up just a little bit and say,
it was a huge issue going on.
I think that we're beginning to hear more common sense generally when it comes to that topic. To grow, we need energy. Technology progress takes energy. Now, maybe we can do it more efficiently, and we are, and over time, of course. But energy necessarily grows as the economy progresses. And if we're right, and the economy and the growth rate of the economy is going to accelerate because of the massive innovation that's taking place out there, we're going to need even more energy. So that's the first thing. But during the seminar, we were able to illustrate that Bitcoin mining in
Cheers, Cliff.
a
I gotta run.
utility
All right, man.
ecosystem
I will see you.
and other energy ecosystems is actually going to help us overbuild renewable energy, solar and wind. Why? Well, as you're putting in this renewable energy ecosystem, you're going to have utilities, going to have storage unit. And in sunny Florida, where I live now, the storage will fill up very quickly, and then it'll just be wasted unless it's put to some good use. Bitcoin mining is that use.
Right.
And what does it do for the utility ecosystem? Okay, mining Bitcoin means you get Bitcoin. And if you're really trying to build out your renewable infrastructure and accelerate it, Bitcoin actually will be an enabler of that. And then, of course, the second one, we saw this with Exxon. I was so surprised to see them putting Bitcoin mining machines into natural gas fields to take instead of flaring gas and even worse, venting it, just using it to mine Bitcoin. That's Exxon. So pretty big buy-in here.
I didn't know about that.
Proof points.
That is pretty cool.
Absolutely. So Bitcoin can be a reliable energy off-taker and an anchor tenant for new generation. And that can be used, we believe, to facilitate more efficient investment in new energy production. And we've seen that done on a smaller scale in Africa,
yes.
To go back to a region you mentioned where Bitcoin is flourishing.
Yes.
Stillmark invested in a company called Gridless that acts as an anchor tenant for new energy generation sites. And what we've seen there is that investors will have a more reliable way to predict their return on investment, and they can stabilize expected cash flows from their investment in new generation. That has the function of driving further development of energy supply. Now, Bitcoin can do the same in the US, and you referenced a need for smart regulation and for a public-private partnership, in a sense, between what's happening on the innovation side, on the technology side, and the way that it is governed or encouraged. How is ARC thinking about that, I wonder?
In terms of government involvement in encouraging the ecosystem?
Sure. What can drive a healthy energy transition? What's necessary, or what has been done?
Oh, I see. And we're still on energy. We're going to switch to government next as we progress. But what can be done in the energy? So it's interesting in being in Tennessee here and around Bitcoin Park, and the energy topic has come up quite a bit. I think accelerating nuclear is going to be a very important part, and I'm very happy to hear and learn of the advancements. Certainly TVA here in Tennessee is very important, but in order to satisfy our energy needs, nuclear has got to be a bigger part of the equation. So I certainly think getting the government behind that, or should I say, getting the government out of it in terms of all of the regulations.
There she goes.
What has strangled nuclear since the 70s is incredible regulation, and it has destroyed the learning curve that nuclear was on. If it had not been derailed by regulation, we would be at a much lower cost. It is the cleanest form of energy as well. So I think that is going to be one of the biggest, most important ways for the government to help us generate the energy supply that we need for the economic growth that we expect.
Yes. and to allow for Bitcoin mining's participation in a healthy energy ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Of course. So Bitcoin is good at not just being a reliable off-taker in the presence of new energy generation, but also responding to the peaks and troughs of renewable energy. And we've heard a bit about that today from this stage already. But one of the things that's notable about Bitcoin mining as an energy off-taker is that it can be much more price responsive than other off-takers. And what that means is that Bitcoin mining doesn't contribute to new peaks. And when you have a peak, a peak demand on the grid, that creates reliability issues. And reliability is a primary concern of stakeholders in the energy space.
Sure.
So Bitcoin as a partner
Sorry, guys, I'm getting
provides sort of
completely
some
sucked into this
resiliency.
conversation.
Absolutely. Data centers
This is a
today
really good
generally
conversation.
need 100% uptime. And so if there is a part of that ecosystem that doesn't need that, actually, that energy at peak times, can step aside, and we heard a lot about that at this conference, then I'm sorry, I lost my thought.
Oh, damn.
Well, so
come on.
What we're
flexibility.
Saying, what we're saying is that Bitcoin mining is unique as a partner to new energy generation and to the energy transition because of its flexibility.
Yes, absolutely.
Because it can be present in times of low prices when demand is low relative to energy supply, and it can back off and still be productive, but back off in times of peak prices where demand outstrips supply, and that's quite unique.
Yes, absolutely.
There's one other thing that Bitcoin can do here in the energy space, and that is that supply and demand have to match in real time.
Yes.
But what doesn't work in real time yet are payments.
That's
and
right.
so we're seeing payments for energy happen over days or weeks or longer. And that necessitates the existence of credit in the system.
Absolutely.
And Bitcoin payments, Lightning Network, because it can work in real time and settle in real time, can remove the need for credit in the system and free up working capital, in fact, to continue investing in new energy development. So there's a significant role for Bitcoin to play in a number of ways on this trend.
Absolutely. Taking out the counterparty risk associated with credit is going to streamline our economy incredibly, and it is the entire economy. It's not just the energy sector, of course. We are going to be taking out the middlemen, and most of you probably know this already. But as we start in this campaign election season, helping the average consumer understand what is in this for me, or what is this? This idea that there's a tax in the system just because of the risks associated with credit, the counterparty risks and other risks. And the tax, we know this from our credit cards, for example, is anywhere from 2 to 5%, and that's consistent across. That's a huge tax on the economy. Think about that as a nice tax cut awaiting us. So I think we're trying, as an educator in the community, we're trying to help people understand. Sure, this is important in energy, but it's important for the entire global economy.
Yes, Lightning solves the credit problem for sure.
Yes.
Perhaps we should switch quickly to regulation.
Yes.
And what we would like to see or hope to see from regulators going forward to drive innovation.
Because this conference is going to become
US
political
competitive
tomorrow when
from
Trump
an
comes
innovation
out.
and technology perspective for Bitcoin.
Sure. I have been so impressed by really the evolution here and how quickly and up to speed our legislators are. And I think we've seen a few things that are extremely positive, and I'll just mention former President Trump accepting campaign donations in Bitcoin, that caught a lot of attention. We're again trying to educate everyone out here. But his
I wonder if Harris is doing that as well.
Statement that he
we should probably look
would
that up.
fight to preserve the right for self-custody, that's critical. And so I'm hearing Yes. And while he does want all the mining to take the rest of the miners to come here to the United States, I think the ecosystem, the Bitcoin ecosystem would want that to remain very decentralized. That's an issue in there right now. But the understanding of this topic, and having met some of our lawmakers here, I am very hopeful that something is going to happen. I know there's rumors of a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Rumors out there. Yeah,
that's what they were saying about this conference. Trump's going to come out and say
if they do it in the right way,
make Bitcoin a reserve
meaning,
coin.
This is not an instrument of monetary policy.
I don't think he's going to do that.
But it simply goes on our balance sheet. Michael Saylor gave us some really good talking points there. This could be transformational.
Fantastic. From our perspective, of course, we're interested in making sure that innovation is safeguarded. Self-custody, of course, is foundational to Bitcoin, and so to protect that is key as well. And then finally, I'll say that thoughtfulness and a research-based approach to regulation in this field is going to be important, and a focus on how traditional definitions apply to the Bitcoin space. For example, money transmitters. What does that mean in a Bitcoin or Lightning world? And making sure that as if you're running a node, for example, that doesn't have control over user funds, that you don't get mislabeled as a money transmitter. And that thoughtful regulation applied to the space can maintain a leadership for Bitcoin in the US, both from an innovation perspective and from an infrastructure perspective as well.
Yeah, well, I'm really excited. I'm really excited for tomorrow. We're going to have a very interesting speaker on that topic, President Trump.
Yeah, it's going to be really
and
interesting.
I'm not going to
I need to watch that tomorrow.
The, introduction, but I think you're going to hear from Senator Lummis from Wyoming, and just listen carefully to what she is saying. Again, you'll see the depth of knowledge
she's actually next.
and understanding, and the passion, and why I have met her a few times. Why is there this passion? It's so American. It's freedom, right? It's freedom.
Yep.
So.
America.
And what's interesting about that, one of our analysts, David Puel, he's a very well-known on-chain Bitcoin analytics expert, has developed some of the metrics out there. He said recently that he thinks that this is the biggest revolution since the Bill of Rights. So and he's from Mexico. He said this is so American, and I think that is what is going to carry us all the way in terms of the political landscape out there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you,
it's a pleasure
Lise.
to have this discussion with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, so there it is. That was Cathie Wood. Coming up next is going to be Cynthia Loomis, as well as Tim Scott. So they're kind of 15 minutes over. The schedule's got a little bit messed up, but that's what we're looking at coming up.
Famed investor Cathie Wood, and in a conversation with Elise Killeen from Stillmark, and we're here to discuss the conversation with Efra Fennickson, host of the You're the Voice podcast. Next to her, we have Aubrey Strobel, advisor to Trust Machines.
I thought that was a really good
Thomas
conversation.
Patia, co-founder of the acclaimed New York Bitcoin bar, PubKey. That was, I think, intended to be a macro conversation, and
I'm not sure what.
Yeah, they ended up
it turned into
sucking me into
different.
that conversation,
So
like
they did get into the weeds
completely
about
getting
Lightning,
lost
which I
in
think is
what their opinion opinions
cool
were.
for people who are a bit into that. But your thoughts on this? So we were talking a little bit
So,
before
that was
we
very
moved back
cool.
here. You know, we need Bitcoin to be a medium of exchange as much as we need it to be a store of value. And we heard Saylor talking earlier about Bitcoin as a store of value. So it's good to hear about Lightning as well. But your thoughts on her talk and how it pertains to the macro picture?
Right. So I think they
Some more of the
touched
gold
on
bug,
many important points here. The ETFs, the
what's his name?
Lightning, and
Peter
the
Schiff
scale of it.
is
I mean,
furiously
layer 2,
tweeting.
energy, Bitcoin mining.
Right
I did
as
feel like
Saylor was on
this
stage,
very
he's just
American-centric, which is
furiously
cool. I understand
tweeting.
that, but we got to remember that Bitcoin's everyone's, and it belongs to everyone, decentralized. A lot of countries are going to probably start looking into it and building their treasuries. So I really like the fact that that was
see if they
a
updated the
diverse
schedule
conversation
on
about many topics, but I think
the
we have to
webpage.
also remember that it belongs
Now
to
that they're
everyone.
That's understandable.
over 15
okay,
minutes
we're actually going
behind.
to come back to continue this conversation in just a second. We're going to throw over to Q for a minute. He's right here behind us in the dome.
Who's Q?
Thanks,
Oh, that
Frank.
guy.
I'm coming to you guys live from the Sound Money Dome. We have changed it up for this year. Instead, we have the Sound Money Dome as a nod to all the wonderful musicians who participate in the Bitcoin space.
I didn't know they had
As
musicians
GA
out there,
Day 1
too.
starts to wind down, we have some incredible talks coming up. I was just speaking to a member of RFK Jr.'s team who is telling me he is locking in for his upcoming keynote in a little bit. Stay tuned for more.
Yeah,
and if you're not
RFK's here,
subscribed
too.
to the channel, hit that subscribe button down below. Back to you on the desk, Frank.
But Cynthia Loomis
Thank you so much, Q. Much
and
appreciated.
Tim
Again,
Scott
we're
are
here with
next.
FNX.
They're going to take the
Your Voice
Nakamoto
podcast,
stage,
Aubrey
which is
Strobel,
where
advisor
they're
to Talk
streaming
Machines, and
from.
Thomas Paccia, co-founder of PubKey. Thomas, your
So,
thoughts
yeah,
on the talk
I'm
between
kinda
with Kathy
interested
Wood,
to see
famed
what they have to
investor,
say.
but really, you know, talking about some technicalities in that
I'd like to
previous
see a lot
Yeah,
of
it
more
was
conversation about
far-ranging. It got a
regulations that are
little
going to
bit
be
off track at times.
going on with crypto.
Look, hodling is a use case. It is usage, but we do have to have payments and other things to help facilitate.
So
I think,
they're
you know,
next on that
natural
one.
growth of the network. Obviously, miners are going to rely on transaction fee growth sooner rather than later. I think they could use some of that revenue like today or yesterday.
Fair.
So, you know, the facilitation of, you know, the payment side of things is really important, deeply complicated, but the use cases, the benefits we can see are very clear, right? If you go to anything by HRF, like it's clear in Africa that there's a need for this electronic cash.
Okay, perfect. Well, I want to hear more from Aubrey when we come back, but we do have to cut back over to the Nakamoto stage.
do it.
We're about to hear from Senators Cynthia Lummis and Senator Tim Scott, and from what we've heard, Cynthia Lummis has some big information to share. So.
Okay. So this is going to be Cynthia Loomis, U.S. Senate, and Tim Scott, U.S. Senate. They are doing a conversation on For the Love of Country and Bitcoin. So let's go ahead and see what they have to say.
Bitcoin from my daughter and my now son-in-law, and it made absolutely no sense to me. The idea of funny internet money.
There you go. Magic internet
I got
money.
to go speak at the
That's a Hillary
Satoshi
quote.
Roundtable. And I was not there to speak about Bitcoin, thank goodness, because I really didn't know that much about it in 2017. But it was a year when there was a fascinating discussion at the Satoshi Roundtable. So I sort of
Next
went
is going to
down
be
the rabbit
Edward
hole,
Snowden
learned
as
a
a
lot
keynote
about
speech.
Bitcoin, and then when I came back to the U.S. Senate, had an area of exposure to a subject that nobody else in the Senate really knew anything about.
They just said
So
she
it
has
sort
a
of
big
gave me a
announcement to
leg
make, so I'm
up.
kind of curious
And
what she might have.
educating people about Bitcoin from the U.S. Senate to your hometown is a big challenge for all of us, especially now that we're crying for clear regulatory policies, which I want to get to. But how did you get here?
Well, thank God for your leadership in the Senate on Bitcoin. I will say without any question, I got here. Let's give her a round of applause. I mean, literally.
All right.
When you're the only senator out of 100 with a clue, you have an immense responsibility, and you took it on your shoulders, and you brought a team together, including me. I actually became a huge fan because I grew up in a single-parent household mired in poverty. And I always wondered, how do we get opportunity back to the poorest Americans, to marginalized communities? And I got to say, without any question, having people who believe in your future is significant. And the concept of democratization brought me to the conversation. The ability, I wanted to be a preacher at one
he's
time.
standing
I'm
now.
going to move around a little bit, so forgive me for moving some. But the ability to bring resources and opportunities and access to the marketplace to the people who need it most. That's what Bitcoin is about. Yeah. That's what this is about. Giving the average American a chance to make their own decisions at home. No matter where you live, if you're on the mountaintop or with me in the valleys low, having a chance to democratize our financial footprint is an absolutely essential part of achieving the American dream. And whatever we can do, wherever we can do it, let's get it done. Let's get it done right now.
Great. So
now she's going to stand
now
too.
You got me standing. Yeah.
Which I guess it would have been kind of awkward if she didn't, but whatever.
Common sense. And you've been leading us on this really important conversation, but the real challenge that we've seen in Congress, there are serious people in the way of making sure that American innovation is leading the globe in innovation. And we have to get rid of the folks who are in the way.
Yeah, and the folks that are in the way, in large part, are on the Senate Banking Committee.
Yes.
And here's the good news. Republicans are going to be in the majority next year, and Senator Tim Scott is going to be the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee.
It's not that I'm not saying I don't like that they're Republican. I don't like the Bitcoin 2024 conference to be slanted as a Republican conference, because it's not. It's a Bitcoin conference.
As the chairman
even
of
though
the
it's being
Banking Committee, the one
keynoted by
thing
Trump.
I will absolutely guarantee will be done is watching your legislation get a vote, pass the Banking Committee, and we're going to fight to make it a law in the United States of America, setting Bitcoin free here at home. Free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty.
All right, dude.
Free at last.
Well, the nexus between Senator Tim Scott's core values and his appreciation for Bitcoin is that it's freedom money. It gives individuals their sovereignty.
Yes.
From the poorest person to Michael Saylor.
100%. Well, Cynthia, Michael Saylor ain't the poorest person. You can say amen to that. But, here's what I can tell you, though. We need to make sure on our committee, the Banking Committee, that we create the kind of rules of the road that are very wide. We need a wide pathway for Bitcoin to be successful here at home, and we need to make sure that things like taxation and regulation does not stifle innovation, is what you taught me.
Absolutely.
So we got to bring the hurdles down so that anywhere in America, the poorest persons do not have to climb a mountain to step over something.
Yeah.
Let's make it easy. And one of the challenges that we see at the SEC with Chairman Gensler.
There we go.
Lord have mercy.
Let's sling some mud. Boo.
I'm glad that we have the same affection for the same people. This is good. This is good. We have to hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more.
Okay, now we're talking.
Yes.
So the problem we're having.
Yeah, explain what I just said.
You have not been in the majority to govern what comes out of the Banking Committee. And the Banking Committee has jurisdiction over the Securities Exchange Commission.
Yes.
So we've been unable to move the needle. They're trying to hoard the definition of what is a commodity versus what is a security, and they're regulating by enforcement action, not by clear rules. We're going to make the rules.
Yes.
That's
We're
so
gonna
frustrating.
Yes. And the good news, Cynthia, one of the things we're going to have to do as we make the rules of the road, a light touch is so important. The one thing you don't want to do in the youth of this industry is to be oppressive. We don't need a large paternalistic hand saying to people who grew up like I did, poor little people, you're too dumb to make your own financial decisions.
Yeah.
That to me is condescending.
Absolutely.
It is paternalistic, and it is dead wrong.
Yep.
We need to make sure that the rules that we create gives a great pathway for individuals to make their decisions. I believe that you can make your best decisions about your financial future. And we need to make sure that the regulatory environment under the next president of the United States, Donald Trump.
I'm sure the people that invested in like Celsius thought the same thing. And now they probably want the government to help them get their money back.
Liberty and freedom are inseparable. And money is a necessary component to experience that freedom. So we want people, whether it's they love their dollars or they love their digital assets, we want them in charge of making their decisions.
Absolutely.
And to the extent that
Edward
we do
Snowden
that,
is
we
coming out
set
next, right after these
people
guys.
free to be autonomous, making your decisions. That's what makes this thing so exciting, because we're so close to the finish line.
So what's so great, as you can see, about Senator Tim Scott becoming the chairman of the Banking Committee is he believes in we the people, that we created the federal government, not vice versa,
Yes.
and that the people should be telling us what to do. So we've been meeting while we've been in town here in Nashville
Right.
with various
She's supposed to have some big
individuals
announcement.
who are helping us understand how to right-size statutes and how to right-size regulations. One of the problems right now is that we don't have a clear regulatory framework in statute that can govern what is a commodity, what is a security, and what kind of rules need to be complied with in order to protect consumers but not stifle growth. That's the sweet spot we're
Yes.
looking for. We don't want to stifle growth, but
Right.
we want to make sure that where appropriate, consumer disclosure is made available. And frequently that is the cut between securities and commodities.
100%. Well, that kind of disclosure is just called transparency. And frankly, what was done so well here is creating an environment where people have great confidence because you have a public ledger on the blockchain. So here's what we know without any questions, that the process itself has been designed around safety and security.
Yes.
Let's just not get in the way of what's working.
Exactly right. So the innovations of Bitcoin are now becoming more clear in the US Senate, and it's also becoming more clear who wants to protect the innovation and who wants to regulate it. And what we're
No.
seeing in this administration
Don't
is
make
that
this
people
political.
who really believe in government, the government knows best. The government should control the money, because
gonna
if
say
government
Republicans.
controls the money, they control us.
Yes.
And so the resistance in this administration is to letting go of power. And so we need to take over the Department of Treasury, the Federal Reserve, the SEC, the CFTC.
So they're going to take their half hour
the
to
OCC,
campaign for
and-
Republicans,
And
is what
the
it sounds like.
FDIC.
and
Yes,
the
yes,
FDIC,
yes, yes.
and which empowers people to continue to innovate. And the innovation absolutely must occur in this country. So that was why
Yes.
the Republican Party, at the direction of Donald Trump, put into the Republican platform
Here we go.
that we're not having a CBDC. We're
Dig it. I'm all
it's
for
a
that.
really smart thing. That individual wallets will be protected as an individual sovereign asset.
Yeah. Dig that. Just trying to get my vote.
Bitcoin mining and the Bitcoin universe needs to be centered in the United States of America.
That's wishful
And
thinking.
To make sure that is a reality, we're on the Finance Committee. The one thing we need to make sure that does not happen is that the mining process takes a lot of energy. Under the Biden administration, they want to put on an excise tax of 30%.
Yeah.
That devastates. We know that a light touch is a whole lot less than 30%. Let's let the energy flow.
Yep.
And we
Mining
are
is
working
already
towards
so
that
hard to be
process,
profitable
especially
right
here
now
in
anyway.
Tennessee, for the Tennessee Valley Authority, nuclear energy is a part of the solution going forward.
Yep. The energy mix is really important. It's also important, Senator Scott, that we have that regulatory framework.
Yes.
So when you, and as Senator Scott said, he's also on the Finance Committee. So next year, we'll be crafting a new tax policy because the current tax policy expires. So we not only have the future chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, but a member of the all-important tax writing committee in the U.S. Senate with us today. And this is your first Bitcoin conference, right?
This is my first Bitcoin conference.
This has been a really good one as well. It's more professional than those that I've seen in the past.
I am not just stunned, I am incredibly excited that you got 20,000 mostly red-blooded Americans showing up, shouting out, and taking control of their financial futures. That is amazing. People have flown all across the world, though. I've met folks from all across the world here.
Exactly.
It's kind of fun.
Well, and the
I want to
people
go to
that
one.
are here from elsewhere in the world also value that individual sovereignty, that personal freedom, and having your own form of money that you choose, that you control, without somebody taking a slice out of the transaction every time it's moved from one holder to the next holder to the next full holder is important. So you look at, for example, El Salvador. There are a lot of people here in the United States working that send remittance monies to El Salvador. They can get out a smartphone, send it to their parents. In El Salvador, the parent doesn't even have to go to Western Union, and so they don't even have to put their health at risk by perhaps getting robbed en route. So this is freedom money all over the world.
100%. But what you said is so important, I don't want to miss that at all, that in fact, this is the safest, securest way to transfer resources to your loved ones in other parts of the world, and the cheapest way
to
transfer those resources.
Absolutely. The banks call it friction. That's their way of saying, I get my piece of the pie.
Yeah.
You know, Senator Scott, you invented opportunity zones.
Yes.
So
I just want to throw out there that Kamala Harris was invited to speak at this Bitcoin conference here, and she did decline. I don't want it to seem like it's one party's side. She was invited. She declined.
Yes.
For creating opportunity zones to Bitcoin.
And one of the things I've said very often, Cynthia, Senator Lummis.
Cynthia's good. And
We got about
with hummus.
10 minutes, and then Edward Snowden's going to come out and start speaking.
I think about is that the good Lord and the people of South Carolina have given me an opportunity to serve the American people. As a kid looking for opportunity, I think it's my responsibility to never forget where you're from. And never forgetting where you're from means creating the kind of legislation and vehicles that bring opportunities everywhere. Opportunity Zones was designed with my why in mind. The stronger your why, the easier your what, the more clear your how to get things done. And Opportunity Zones is bringing back over $70 billion to fight poverty in the poorest areas without using a single federal dollar. All private dollars, all private incentives, letting people make their own decisions. Bitcoin allows for people in the private sector, unhindered by government, to make their own decisions, to make investment decisions. You know, a few years ago, my nephew started educating me about Bitcoin. And about 2 weeks from now, he passes his test to be a doctor.
Wow.
But what he's been telling me is, Uncle Timmy, diversify. It's called financial literacy. Even at 58 years old, I'm still becoming more financially literate.
It's a lot different tune when Michael Saylor just came out and said you need to be a Bitcoin maxi and invest all your money in Bitcoin.
By bringing
Leverage
more
your house.
resources, more tools to the poorest Americans. This Bitcoin movement says the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And so I see parallel tracks, and that's why I get really excited about what I get to do every single day. It's the fight for people who can't show up in Washington to fight for themselves. We work for people. We don't lead them first. We work for them first. We're your servant, and I have to listen, and then I lead.
Well, I've got to say, I can't think of anyone better to lead the Senate Banking Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. Can we give a warm welcome to Senator Tim Scott?
Thank you.
So was that her announcement? Just that he's running for this position?
I'll close.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it, I guess.
I'll close. Thank you all very much. I should have turned around. I had a 17-person standing ovation. I missed it. I'm sorry. Thank you, three right there. Appreciate you, my man. Thank you very much. Yes. So let me close with this. Since 2017, there's been one champion in the United States Senate who made the decision after attending a conference that she wanted to champion the cause of individual freedom, individual liberty, individual decision-making. And you can live or die by your own choices, but it is not her responsibility to make them for you. It's her responsibility to set you free. Her name is Cynthia Lummis.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so that was Cynthia Lummis and Tim Scott. Coming out next is going to be Edward Snowden.
Turning waste into value by reducing landfill emissions.
Yeah, we got Edward Snowden taking the Nakamoto stage.
In Finland. With Mara,
he was
we're
supposed
building
to be
the
out
base
there
layer
at
of a
3:30,
sustainable
which
future.
the time in
To learn more,
Nashville
visit
is
mara.com.
3:38. They're running a little bit behind, but that's okay.
Welcome back,
Everything's
everybody.
fine.
We are here at the Mara live desk
So,
here at
they
Bitcoin
might need
2024,
a couple minutes to
presented
prep
by
the
Bitcoin
stage,
Magazine. We're here to my left with
but
Preston Pish, general
he is
partner
next.
at Ego Death Capital, Efrat Fenixon,
Interested to
host of the
see
You're the Voice
what he's
podcast,
actually
and
going to
Aaron
be
von
talking
Weirdum,
about.
author of the Genesis book published
They
by
have
Bitcoin
him listed
Magazine.
as whistleblower
So we
and
just heard from
cybersecurity
Senators
expert.
Cynthia Lummis and Senator Tim Scott. The
All
two
right.
senators discussed the regulatory environment in the United States and potentially how that might improve under Trump. So Preston, I wanted your thoughts. Should we be listening to these politicians when they say, we know that they're sort of pandering in a way or speaking to their constituents in a way that they want to hear?
Yes, they're pandering.
Should we be taking them at their word, taking them seriously?
No,
or as
you should not
Bitcoiners,
be
should we
taking them at their
sort of,
word.
A bit more critical of what they're saying.
So first off, we should always be critical. We should always be concerned, and we should always be questioning everybody. And you know what? I voted. I have my voted sticker here, and it says I hodled.
Hodled.
And this is how we change things around here. Is you hodl your Bitcoin, you suck the monetary energy out of this legacy parasitic system, and guess what? You're going to find a whole lot more politicians that start showing up here.
Yep.
And we just witnessed the future chairman of the Senate Banking and Finance Committee saying those things that you just heard. Okay, so you know how you get more people to start saying that stuff? You get your voting sticker
hodl.
here that you go out and you hodl your Bitcoin. You don't sell your Bitcoin because you force them to start playing your game. Okay, I find this quote to be quite interesting. Bitcoin is the safest and securest way to transmit large amounts of value. The future chairman of the Senate Banking Committee literally just said that on stage. You want to keep them saying that? Start voting with your hodling.
This is true. We are sort of pulling people into a vortex here at Bitcoin 2024. Plenty of politicians, congressmen, or congresspeople, senators, and presidential candidates with us. We have two non-Americans with us, so we'd love some perspective from outside
What do you think,
of the
chat?
U.S.
Is this
So let me
getting
kick it over to
too
Efrat for a
political?
second. Your thoughts on the talk that you just heard?
Yeah, well, first of all, the fact that you do have politicians that are talking about Bitcoin and raising awareness about a different type of monetary system, this is already a good blessing. I think we don't have that in most of the other countries around the world, definitely not the country I come from Israel. And I think that the politicians in most countries that are highly corrupt are still being fiat-led with agendas. And so we have to remember that that's already a great first step. Then the other great thing that I've heard here is no CBDCs, which is great news, but we got to still be critical, like Preston said, about stablecoins and what kind of role they're going to be using in the new monetary system as CBDCs.
Especially as they add
we'll come back
stablecoins
to that
to
in just a second.
Bitcoin.
Aaron, I'm going to come back to your opinion in just a moment, if you don't mind. We're going to cut to Q. Just a minute. He's back here, I think, behind me in the dome. Let's cut. We'll be right back.
Thank you, Frank. I'm coming to you live from the Mezzo booth, getting an IV drip from Intravenous Solutions. Look, we're in Nashville. The conference is off.
They got to cut to their sponsor.
We're having the best time here, but of course, we're also having some fun outside of the conference as well. Hitting up Broadway, bouncing around.
If you guys would throw me a like
we got the Whale Night
on
event
YouTube,
tonight. Heck, if you know, you know what the beefsteak event is tonight as well. This is going to be one of the best conferences. If you were hurting like I was today, come down to the booth, get an IV drip. Look, we got 2 more days of this. It's not stopping just because it's Friday night. We're going to go hard. 1 more day of the conference, 2 more nights. Frank, back to you guys at the booth.
Quite the comedian we have there with Q.
Edward Snowden should be coming out any minute.
Giggling a bit as we watched. So we have Preston Pish to my left, Efra Fennison, and Aaron Von Weirdum. Aaron, I wanted to kick it over to you. Again, from someone who lives outside of the United States, when you hear these U.S. politicians talking, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's like when I hear one of these senators say they want America to be the center for Bitcoin.
We're just waiting for Snowden to come out.
I want to sit here and say, hey, Europe or the Netherlands has something to say about that. But the reality actually is that we don't. We don't have these politicians saying these kinds of things. I haven't heard it.
Okay.
Like maybe in some small niches I've heard, like I think there was a representative from Latvia at one point that said something in the European Commission.
There's one in Germany.
Yeah, in the Netherlands we have like a backbencher, as you'd call it, that said something, but it's very scarce. Not the counterpoint here to your other question is that Bitcoin, of course, as I also write in the Genesis book, it comes from this cypherpunk culture, and the cypherpunks, their philosophy was basically in the long term you can't trust politicians with your freedom.
Right.
The way to protect your freedom is ultimately through software, through developing and spreading software, and that is what Bitcoin fundamentally, that is what Bitcoin represents.
Yeah.
But having said that, I would much rather have politicians say these kinds of things than calling for bans and restrictions. Like this is still better.
Yeah.
Like,
okay. I think that's a fair point. So we have the cypherpunk ethos plus politicians coming around. Preston, your thoughts on that?
They're being forced to play our game, right? So do I like to see somebody being forced to play our game? Hell yeah.
So Snowden is coming out
Can't you like that?
anytime now. And then after him, they're going to have RFK as the
We know that
keynote.
Germany just sold, I believe it was.
He's going to do another half an hour.
That's right, just recently. And she was the only one that stood up and said, Germany, you're
Probably going to
crazy.
stick around
What are you
and
doing?
watch
This could
RFK
be
as
our
well.
leverage and our,
As I'm
one
looking through their
advantage in Europe,
agenda,
and we're
I
selling
don't think
off
there's anyone
something
else I
that
really
could
want
build
to
our
see.
next future treasury. So yeah, it's ridiculous. There are not enough.
They do have a
politicians that are
Q&A
aware of that.
at 4:30 with RFK,
to see
so that
some
could be
major
cool.
changes in how countries are behaving with their reserve assets.
And they
we
go
definitely need to
until
start educating
5:30.
We just need a really large clown nose that we could have just donned on the country of Germany this month.
Yeah,
With
But,
very much appreciate.
a
Yeah,
Bitcoin
absolutely.
investment
It was
group.
kind of silly, and but the good news is that the selling pressure seems to have subsided, and
Probably not
we
gonna
have,
stick
we
around
seem
for
to
that
have
one.
Circumvented the curse of the Bitcoin conference. The Bitcoin's trading at what, about $67,000
This is
today?
true.
So this one I'm mainly looking to hear
So-
from
And there was another thing that
and
she said
Snowden
there,
now. I think that's probably going to be it for me.
Individual wallets protected.
Yes.
That's really cool.
Yes, I agree. And I think that sort of rhetoric, very specific rhetoric that we can then hold the politicians' feet to the fire to is super, super important. So anyway, again, we are here at the Mara Desk at Bitcoin 2024. As you can see behind us, as you might be getting the sort of impression, this place, the energy is wild. I think we have
There's a
about
lot of people
20,000
there,
people
too.
with us today. But we want to cut to the main attraction right
Here we
now,
go.
which is going to be political dissident and whistleblower Edward Snowden coming to us virtually. So let us cut back over to the Nakamoto stage.
All right. All right, so this is going to be Edward Snowden coming out. He is giving a speech at Bitcoin 2024. Kind of excited to see what he's going to have to say. So let's go ahead and see these people announcing him coming out.
You are.
Obviously, he can't be there.
Our next speaker used to work for one of these three-letter agencies, but when he realized they were spying on the American people, he decided to take a stand.
Yeah, so this is going to be virtually. Hopefully the call comes in pretty clear.
Unfortunately, he cannot literally stand with us here right now because it turns out that when you expose the crimes of the state,
yeah, I think he's living in Moscow.
That doesn't go over too well with, well, the state.
It is our honor to introduce Edward Snowden.
Please give him a warm welcome.
All right, here we go. Look at all the people. It's actually a good crowd. There he is.
Hello, everybody. It's good to be with you.
This is live, right? Or are they pre-recorded?
This is an amazing crowd. All right, everybody. I can't hear you, so I'm just going to.
No, I think it's pre-recorded.
I want to say, first off, it's a pleasure to be with you. I spoke recently at the Bitcoin conference in Amsterdam, and the things we talked about were very different. It's remarkable what a difference we see in just 9 months. The last time, the topic was really about how the game is rigged, but we can't leave. And in fact, it feels like it's too good to leave. We put up with the abuse. We know they're breaking the rules, not because we love it, but because we haven't ever had an alternative. And what's amazing is that we're starting to make our own. One of the core things that came up 9 months ago was Gary Gensler, Gary Gensler, Gary Gensler. Everybody was hanging on his words. Yep. And I had to remind everybody that Gary Gensler is not Daddy Bitcoin. And now it's much easier to make that argument because we see that, in fact, Bitcoin is Daddy Gensler. We are winning, ladies and gentlemen. But we haven't won. And so we have to make sure that we don't get cocky. And I think, unfortunately, that's about the end of the fun part of this talk. But I think this year, plenty of people will be talking about the happy stuff. So you won't need me for that. I noticed that we have a lot more political representation this year, which
definitely
is a wonderful,
seeing that.
remarkable thing. We've reached the fight, the stage of the fight where, they go, oh, then they fight us. But it's actually, then they try to get us to love them. And what I want to say on that briefly, because I don't want to make this talk about all the politics there, is cast a vote, but don't join a cult. They are not our tribe. They are not your personality. They have their own interests, their own values, their own things they're chasing. Try to get what you need from them, but don't give yourself to them, even if you have to vote for them.
It's good advice. I dig it.
Instead, what I want to do is set this frame a little different for this conversation. I want you to reflect on where we are, how we got here, and where we're headed. There's a passage from a book that I think for this crowd really resonates. It says, for in every country of the world, I believe, the avarice and injustice of princes and sovereign states abusing the confidence of their subjects have by degrees diminished the real quantity of metal value which had been originally contained in their coins. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, written in the year 1776. We're not playing games with metals anymore. But if you look around, you can see that the problems from that kind of thinking are springing up everywhere. They're reaching us. They're choking us. And you see this in the internet as well. What is it that's
Sorry,
wrong
my dog was
with the
barking
internet?
back there.
The thing that's wrong with the internet is what's wrong with the world, because more and more they're one and the same. A system has been constructed around us, not just through administrations, but through generations, that is fundamentally unfair. What do I mean by that? Look at the economy, right? There's an increasing concentration of resources into fewer and fewer hands. So it is now even with the human voice. Winner take all is the model that's apparent on platforms as far as the eye can see. Whether you're talking about broadcast media, whether you're talking about legacy media, whether you're talking about newspapers, whether you're talking about social media, minority opinions are increasingly made to survive at the indulgence of the censor. They're clinging to the edge of the platform by their fingernails. You see truckers in Canada that are getting debanked, and you see students at Columbia are getting de-hired for
Yeah,
the things
definitely
that they
seen
express.
that.
Now, we don't have to agree with them. We shouldn't necessarily agree with them, but they should have the ability to argue. They should have the ability to persuade. They should have the ability to dissent. They should have the ability, frankly, to disrupt. That's the thing that makes us progress, right, is the disagreement. If we accept that the system that we inherited is the best that it can possibly be, it shouldn't change, it shouldn't be contested, what we're saying is that we've gone far enough. This point in history is the best, and it's not. We know it's not. Life is still difficult despite the many privileges, despite the many technologies that have blessed us. But somebody made those things happen. Every good thing that you enjoy is the product of someone's labor, the product of someone's effort, the product of someone's ingenuity, the hours of their lives being gifted to us, to the common species. And the system that has been built around us is designed to extract as much of that as possible and return that to the hands of those princes. You'll notice none of the things that I mentioned are, deeply technical in nature. It's all very broad and general audience. But the thing that I want to warn you about tonight is that I fear that that is about to change. Our lives have been increasingly intermediated by screens, by panes of glass, right? You are watching this either live on stage because you registered through a smartphone, through a laptop, right? Nobody went and sort of bought a ticket at the counter anymore. That's not how the world works these days. But in order to even set that computer up, to turn it on, to log in, to set up your account, to pull the smartphone out of the box, charge it, open it up, connect it to your Wi-Fi access point, you have to click OK to continue. You have to agree to somebody else's terms of service. You are made to pass through gates of permission that are owned and controlled by others, that do not answer, frankly, to anybody. You see Facebook, you see Google, you see how they've been abusing the trust of everyone in every country, right? You see the EU tries to get a handle on them. They're completely ignored. There was the GDPR, right? General Data Protection Regime regulation that was supposed to fix all of these problems. And it didn't work. They say, oh, we'll fine you, 4% of global revenue or whatever if you break the rules. That hasn't happened. And it's been years and years and years. Whether we're talking about governments, whether we're talking about corporations, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the systemization of technologies that are designed to order our lives to the benefit of the institutions. They are trying to organize us to benefit them. In some cases, we want this. We want to be able to cooperate. We want to be able to collaborate. We need to be able to work together, right? But we have to agree to this in some way. We should need to. And it's not like click OK to continue or say no and use the phone my way, right? It's click OK to continue or you can't use your iPhone. You can't use your Android phone. It doesn't matter whether Samsung makes it, whether Google makes it, whether Apple makes it. You play by their rules or you don't play at all. And that should be changing. We'll get to it a little bit later where we are making great strides in the context of money, which is why suddenly we see a lot of political interest in these audiences.
Yeah.
They understand that there is a new center of power that is rising. But there is a new field of vulnerability that applies to all of us, including all of these luminaries that will be speaking on stage here. And that is artificial intelligence, right? I am not one of the guys that goes on the internet and is like, oh, AI safety, the robots are going to kill us. You need to worry about this. I say, in fact, I want all of them to dump all of these
Throw me a
models
like
out
on
the
YouTube
internet
if you
where we
would.
can all use these.
Trying to get the stream
OpenAI,
going.
which is not open at all and is a very closed model company that wants to benefit themselves at your expense. They want to train on your data, but benefit themselves. And they don't want you to have access under the covers. They don't want you to be able to pull down the models, distill it, get one you can run at home, put it on your phone, do whatever you want with it. They want you to have to go back to their watering hole, pay them rents, and to access all of this only through their ways, even if you did have the ability technologically, hardware-wise, to run this at home. The good news is it is becoming easier and easier to get this stuff in public hands, to run this on home machines. And I'm not just speaking rhetoric here. I've spent the last year using these models myself at home. You can do this too. Open source models, whether we're talking about diffusion models for generative imaging, right? Sort of what you think of like the Mid-Journey, the nice web interfaces. You can do that at home. It's 100% free as long as you've got the hardware to run it. And it's getting easier and easier to do this. Whether we're talking about large language models, Facebook, which again I've been throwing invective at for the beginning half of the talk, has actually been a force for good in this space. Not because they love you or they love us or they love me or anything like that, but because they're afraid their competitors, like OpenAI that I mentioned, are going to build a structure around them, ring fence them in a little plot that they can then tax forever. And Facebook doesn't want to end up there, right? So they go, well, what we'll do is we'll develop the tools and give them to everyone else so a monopoly can't form and be used against us. Self-interest more so than altruism, but I still applaud it, right? And I'm no fan of Mark Zuckerberg, but he's done wonderful things here. I hope he continues. I know it won't last forever, but for the moment, while it does, I'll welcome the help that we can get there. But why am I bringing this up, at a Bitcoin conference? Well, the reason why is that Bitcoin transactions are not private. All of you know this here on the general sense because it's 2024 and this is not, back in 2013 where we're saying, Bitcoin is perfectly anonymous and it's money for criminals and whatever. The only person who still believes that is Elizabeth Warren. The reality is that
a nice little dig
Bitcoin
he threw in there.
Transactions are permanent, they are public, and they can be tracked and they can be linked. An enormous proportion of them are fully doxed, just not publicly doxed. And this is because how do people move in and off of sort of the Bitcoin network, any crypto chain really? And it's through the on and off ramps, right? Through these legacy exchanges that get licensed by whatever New York State or whatever country, whether it's in Dubai, whether it's in New York. And they are sharing the information en masse with what we politely refer to as regulators, but what are plainly described as great powers. Right? People are not really focused on sending this stuff to the government of Barbados. But if they're worried about catching an indictment from that government, they will send anything that government asks for to them, and then they'll say, is there anything else you need while we're at it? Well, there was still one saving grace, which was there were parts of that chain which were not fully identified and verified. You could have private transactions. You could send $5 for your buddy for pizza, as long as the on-chain transaction fees were low. Otherwise, you wait and save it up. But the idea here is that you could still engage in the network and presume that it would just age off eventually. It's out there, it's on the blockchain, somebody has it, maybe they'll prune it. But it's not you. It's not that everybody will know everything you did anywhere all the time forever. Because when they have your transaction history, they have your life history. They know what you read, what you buy, who you send, who you support,
can see everything,
like where your donations went. All of that is available to them. They can infer your thinking. They can infer your affiliations. At the NSA, we called the kind of information that was not the details of a conversation, right? Not literally reading like your texts, but simply saying that you texted someone. And this was under their interpretation. In my interpretation, it's a violation of the Constitution, but in their interpretation, this didn't impact the Fourth Amendment at all because it's not a search, because it's not reading your messages themselves. It's simply tracking the flow of messages. We called this kind of information metadata, right? And that metadata padded out what was your pattern of life. Metadata can be plainly described as activity records. It's the same kind of thing that a private investigator would get if they just followed you around all day. They don't sit behind you at the cafe and hear everything you say because you would wonder, who is this dude following me? But they sit outside in a car on the street. They see that you go in the cafe at this time. They see that you sit at a table with this other person. They send a guy to go, who is that person? What's his license plate? Who is he? They know that you met. They get the affiliation. They see you go to work. They see you go to the store afterwards. They don't see every item that you bought, but they see where you shop. And as you pad these things out more and more, you get a more and more complete picture of an entire human life without ever having to go, oh, we need a warrant for this. What held that back? Well, cost. You needed a human analyst to go and sift through this. The metadata could be collected automatically by ingesting the world's internet communications through these machines, right? But somebody still had to put their cup in the big bucket, pull it out, and you know, lay it out on their desk and make sense of it. Machine learning models are going to change this. In my opinion, this is already being done. We simply don't have evidence of it yet. It's going to be testing, it's going to be development. We don't know how it's being applied, when it's going to be truly operational, but it is fantasy to imagine that they're not doing this. And there is zero regulation that I am aware of in the United States to prevent this. Nobody is thinking about what these agencies are doing. And we're not just talking about the NSA here. We're not just talking about the FBI. We're talking about the IRS, right? And it's not just the United States. It's every country. You may go, oh, I love the United States government doing this. I hope they spy on me as much as possible. Well, what about China? What about Russia? What about North Korea? What about Iran? What about every little government that you don't like, that you don't agree with, right? And suddenly they can have every life of every person, every day, at every moment, on a live feed, being interpreted at machine speed. And then you start feeding that those inferences into a decision-making process. This is the reason that I bring up the protesters at Columbia University, the protesters in Canada, right? It doesn't matter whether you're liberal, it doesn't matter whether you're conservative. If you stick out, if you stand out, you are going to become non-normative. Or rather anomalous. What I am afraid is likely to happen quite quickly, right? Probably not this year. Within 3 years, it'll begin being done, I think, at some scale. And within 5 to 10 years, it'll be done absolutely regularly, routinely. Is that they're going to take all of the transaction information that they can get. And this is going to start with big banks going on their own personal data sets. It's going to flow from there to people going, oh, where can we get this information publicly? Well, the Bitcoin blockchain is available for anyone for free at any time, right? And how do you train these models? You need learning sets. You need training data. You need data sets. So they're going to pull everything they can. They're going to feed it through these things. And they're going to try to teach them originally, I think this is going to be the easiest thing, what does a normal transaction look like? You know, what do 95% look like? And then they're just going to go, what is anomalous? What is strange? What is unusual? What doesn't quite fit? And then they're going to go from that's a 5% probability down to a 3% probability, then try to get it smaller and smaller and smaller until they can just basically have people that are getting reports spit out on their desk, little, you know, chat messages to their terminal, basically. They're saying, this just happened, this just happened, this just happened. Do you want to continue? And that banking officer is going to get a click OK to continue on your life, on your ability to transact, on your ability to trade. It's not just going to be Bitcoin. It's going to be Visa. It's going to be MasterCard. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be PayPal, right? Whether you're subscribing to an OnlyFans account or something like that, which, you know, is a very common thing, but something that a lot of people aren't going to admit to. They're not going to be proud of, right? that's going to start making these institutions go, oh, do we want to continue our business association with these people? Is there a brand risk, on stage here? And I think we really need to think about how do we secure the transactions on the Bitcoin network moving forward. I have said this for 10 years. I have been ignored for 10 years. Well, we're running out of runway. And again, right now, every time you're on this network, and I love this network, I've used it many times, you are going to be adding to the data set.
Right.
Even if they don't identify you because you're the, whatever mystic cyber ninja that knows how to protect yourself, who is the counterparty that you're trading with? Are you sending it to your buddy? Are they doxxed, right? Are you sending it to a business that you're paying? Are they doxxed? And larger parts of this transaction mesh of this network, as they get identified, the space for everyone else to have any kind of private interaction diminishes. Now, you might go, well, these big businesses, Visa, MasterCard, yeah, they have the transaction history for everybody, everywhere, all the time. And you don't know what they're using it for. But they're not screwing you, right? Well, AT&T, it was revealed this year, lost all of their subscribers' information, or an enormous subscribers' information, for a block of time. I think it was something like 6 months. Where all of your text messages, all of your phone calls, all of the things that went through their routing network, including some cell site location information, which means which cell phone tower you were connected to, were stolen by hackers. They haven't said who they are. As far as I know, they may not have been identified yet. Maybe they'll never be identified. We don't know whether it's state-sponsored or whatever. Maybe there's been ongoing reporting since then. It's revealed it. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure somebody will be out there to tweet about it. But the bottom line is this, right? These enormous data sets are a liability. We know they cannot protect them. You cannot control them. And they can have enormous influence over our lives. All of these people who are coming up on stage and saying these wonderful things about how much they love Bitcoin, how much they love you, how they're going to do all these wonderful things to make something better. The United States is the only advanced democracy on the planet that I am aware of that does not have a basic privacy law. We have the Fourth Amendment, right? That only binds the federal government. That doesn't do diddly squat to protect you against corporations. And the government, for 90% of their work, probably 95% of their work in intelligence nowadays, they simply go to corporations and ask them for information. It's end run around the Constitution. And we have been able to suffer this, right? Again, the game is too good to leave. Not because we love it, but because we haven't had a choice. Well, we're running out of time to fix this, and the consequences of ignoring it are about to get a whole lot worse. Nobody sees them. This is not Terminator, right? This is not Skynet. This is not robots descending from the sky to drag you out of your home. That might come someday, but that's a long way off. We're talking about some things that are much more banal, but much easier to do. We talk about that concentration of power. These politicians, right? A lot of them probably don't love that they have to come up on this stage and give a dog and pony show to dance for the crowd that is suddenly much more powerful. Well, the people that they have always been accountable to are about to get a much tighter hold on the leash, not just of them, but of everyone. So I want to zoom back out because we've only got a limited time this evening and say, look, the reason that the internet feels broken is because it is reflecting a broken world. It's reflecting the consequences of all of these winner-take-all dynamics. It is reflecting the boundless ambition of these generations of princes. And it has left us with an unfair system, which means an unstable system. Why do I think all of this AI stuff is likely? Well, the reason is that unfair systems produce dissatisfaction and therefore are hard to maintain. Well, the people who want to maintain them are those who benefit the most from them. In the current disequilibrium, they're the ones who have the most resources. They have the ability to influence the status quo the most. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep the top spinning for as long as possible without letting it fall over and someone having to write it in a new stage, right? Instead of staying in the same game, even if it's good, we don't want to leave it. We start a new round, right? We start a new game with new rules. The reality is we're not at the worst of it yet, but we are headed in that direction. It's clear to me. And I think if you look at, like, does this feel normal to you? When you look at the candidates, when you look at the dynamics, even the people on stage giving all the speeches.
I've been saying that.
Right?
It's so weird to have all these
Terrible.
politicians
I'm
here.
not taking a position at all. But this is a little unusual. The fact that they're here is a little bit unusual. Things
From
are
magic
changing,
internet
changing
money
more quickly
to
all the time.
now we're here with
We
you.
have passed the
Trump.
inflection point,
Trump of all
and we're
people. He's
accelerating down
literally
the
the
slope, and we're
Republican
reaching the point where
candidate
all
running.
of us are about to have to make very serious decisions about how we spend the rest of our lives to try to make the world better for our children and for those who come after us. Our economy, politics, even culture have reduced the access to an equal role. And that has produced resentment, grievance that have blossomed to the point that now every discussion feels like it is becoming an instrument for war by other means. And we are competing constantly, and we are cooperating rarely. And we need to change that. Because if you ask yourself, who is it that's competing, for all of the highly energized talk about like radicalism, the increase of extremism, which is not wrong, it's unevenly distributed. I see very little in the way of like cutthroat competition and blood sport amongst the banks. As far as the average worker is concerned, whether we're talking about this election or any other in the last 20 years, a given election tends to result in what feels like a different uniform of the same cop. And that's a problem. Elections do have consequences. They do matter, right? There are differences. But sometimes it feels like they're less meaningful than they should be. And that is, I think, what we're all feeling. That is the seed of all of us. We are supposed to have our hands on the lever as a collective public, as the commons, right? And we still get to cast our votes, but it seems like our votes are not as meaningful as they want. Do you really believe that the two frontrunners are what the collective will of this country would choose as the two best Americans, right? When you were a child and you were in school, they're like, oh, the president's the best person. And does it feel like that? I don't think so. And so that leaves us with the questions to walk us out of this. The question that we're being confronted with every day, what are you going to do about it? The reality is not much, right? Right now, if you're
That's
the average
depressing.
person, you're going to post a mean tweet, about somebody you don't like, and then post a picture of yourself looking cool on Instagram, and then forget about it. You want to watch your shows. You want to go home. You want to be comfortable. You want to, get dinner. You want to go to bed. You've got a job to do, right? You've got rent to pay. We're all running on a treadmill. And then what? And for what? Right now, we're doing it for the likes. We're trying to get approval. We're trying to get acceptance. We are being driven to compete for attention and for acceptance. We need to start, instead of competing, we need to start cooperating, working together to find our way out of this hole that is not this election, it's not this politician, it's not this policy, it's this system. And that's what Adam Smith was telling us about the year 1776, a powerful year for every American. The internet is broken because institutions are competing against the individual, while the individual is competing against other individuals. We need to shatter that design because competition is everywhere, but it's only against the powerless. We need to look back at the avarice of those princes. Right? And I don't just mean in the context of government. I mean everywhere. I mean, Jamie Dimon, J.P. Morgan. We need to think about the systemic influences on our lives and how we can correct for them. The people who throughout all history had the means to diminish the amount of metals in our coins, which is inflation, simply by a different name. We're not using metal anymore. We're using paper now, but the game is the same. We in this room are using a technology that has taken the metal and the paper away from them. And it is through this single lever that they have set flourishing societies on the path to inevitable poverties. And I just want you to remember, every time you look at the grocery store's prices, that you are not alone, you are not isolated. Everyone in that store is dealing with the same battle that you are. We have to cooperate, we have to work together, and we have to make sure they do not reduce this country to the land of the free and the home of the slave. The only way we will do that if we work together. So please, by all means, cast your vote, but don't join a cult. There's a lot of work to be done. Thank you.
All right, so there you have it. Edward Snowden pretty much saying the government is going to be using machine learning to perform log analysis on your Bitcoin transactions. So coming up next is going to be RFK. He's doing a key minute for 30 minutes. I'm going to run to the restroom real quick and leave this one going. So I'll be right back.
Welcome back, everybody. We are here at the Mara Live Desk at Bitcoin 2024, presented by Bitcoin Magazine. To my left, I have Preston Pish, General Partner at Ego Death Capital, Aaron Von Weirdum, author of The Genesis Book, and Vlad Costa, host of the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. Aaron, I want to kick it right over to you to get your takeaways from what we just heard from whistleblower Edward Snowden. You wrote a book about people who created technologies that combat some of the abuses that corporations and other entities purport upon other people using the technologies that they have. So please tell us a little bit about the importance of the cypherpunks and the technology they created, things like Bitcoin.
Right, yeah, so Snowden is really sort of voicing the cypherpunk fear, if you will. So the cypherpunks was this group of activists, developers, privacy advocates back in the 90s, and they foresaw with the emergence of the internet that without strong encryption tools, without strong cryptography, the internet could become this dystopian Orwellian 1984 nightmare where everything you do online, every message you send, every website you visit, every transaction you make can all be monitored, analyzed, censored, and that is what Snowden is speaking about. So in a way, Snowden is kind of saying like it has gone in that direction, it has gone in the wrong direction. Well, the cypherpunks set out to prevent that future, and to an extent they did help prevent at least part of it. We do have strong encryption tools now.
Absolutely.
And of course Bitcoin itself comes from that culture. Now Snowden does point out that privacy on Bitcoin is not perfect either, and that's true. It has its flaws.
Yeah.
But it can also be improved, and it is being improved. And for me personally, I would say that is the number one priority for Bitcoin, for developers. Like that is the thing that people should be focusing on, like improving the privacy of
Agreed.
Bitcoin.
An issue where we wrote about the samurai case.
All right, so I'm
Vlad,
back.
your thoughts on that? Yeah, improving privacy, allowing
What'd
developers
you guys
to
think of
create
Edward
tools
Snowden?
that allow for people to use Bitcoin more privately.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah, so
pretty cool, right?
I displayed the article that Aaron wrote. I was trying to do a shameless plug for him.
Thank you, Vlad.
But basically, it's very important because we have the main stage that's filled with people who have very optimistic expectations about growth in terms of price. But I haven't heard anyone say, you know, Bitcoin needs to become fungible. We need transactions to have a certain degree of privacy, because if they don't, it's going to be just a panopticon for institutions.
Yeah, that's pretty much his whole speech right there was how are we going to build in privacy on the transactions in
the issue of
Bitcoin.
Samurai Wallet, I'm a bit biased because I've been on Team Wasabi. But when they got arrested, I said,
And
you know,
he's
these guys,
absolutely right
if
with
the
more
same thing happened to me,
KYC
they
that we
would have
have.
danced on my grave.
Obviously, they're
But
going to
I
know what
do
wallet
want
belongs
them
to you.
be free, and I do want them to write software, and I do want competition for privacy to exist in Bitcoin, and I do want something with confidentiality to come to Bitcoin.
Appreciate
guys
that.
would
I apologize
throw
for
me
cutting you.
a
We do have to
like
cut over to our man on the
on
floor,
YouTube.
Q. Thank you so much for the perspective.
Coming up
Bill.
next is going to be
We're gonna cut over to you,
RFK.
Q, and we'll be right back.
He is the keynote
Thanks, Frank. I'm coming to you
at
guys
4
live.
p.m.
Mere feet.
Which should be any moment
Oh
now.
my God, this sounds a little weird to me. But we are
And
live.
he's going to be taking
shortly from
the
desk.
Nakamoto
Wanted to let everyone know
stage.
the Nakamoto stage is now full at capacity. They aren't letting anyone in. We actually had a small crowd.
It has him
gather
listed
right in front of the
as
desk
independent
to watch the
presidential
stream
candidate,
on
so I guess he
these,
still
TVs
is
that you
running.
see behind me.
He hasn't dropped
Guys,
out yet.
This conference is coming to a close on GA Day 1. Back to you guys at the desk before we wind down the rest of the day.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah, so
we are about to kick it over to RFK on the main stage.
He's going to be the
on
last one that I
Nakamoto
watch.
stage, but before we get there, I want to hear from Preston here.
The
What
rest
are you
of the
hoping
people
to
are
hear from RFK?
not really people that I'm interested in, but it does go until 5 o'clock.
Dream as he tells us all the things that we really want to hear him say. But I say that, and I say it at the same time.
And then
coming
tomorrow,
off Ed's
Trump is
amazing,
going to be doing
job on stage where he
his
had a
keynote
quote. He
speech,
said,
so I kind of want to
"Then
see
they
that
fight
as well.
you," but he said, "Be
Just curious,
cautious
you know,
because they're
what does he
gonna-
have to say about
the way that
Bitcoin?
they're going to fight you is to convince
I don't
you
want it to get too
love them."
political, but you know, it's
Okay?
Trump is going to get
So,
really political
Of course, we want to
tomorrow.
hear these things. I think we are going to hear those things out of RFK moving forward. But you always got to keep your guard up, and you always have to hodl because that's how we really.
Let me know
vote
what you
around
think,
here.
chat.
So that's my going into the RFK speech. Keep your guards up.
I think that's an important take. We had RFK on the cover of Bitcoin Magazine a few issues back. Aaron, your thoughts? What are you looking to hear?
I think RFK was the keynote last
American
year
politics, I don't know,
at the Bitcoin conference as well.
I don't think Aaron and I vote in this country. So
That's fair. Yeah, it's fair.
Go
All right.
Bitcoin.
But maybe the wrong person to ask. So we do want to shout out to RFK, though. He was here last year, 2023.
Oh, yeah, see, there you go. He was
and,
last
we had
year.
Caitlin Long on the desk the other day, and she said, in speaking with him, you know, he is one of the real ones. He really gets it. He seems to be one of the ones who isn't pandering as much. So
we'll see what he has to say.
Without further ado, we are going to head it back to the Nakamoto stage to hear from RFK himself. Thank you so much for sticking with us, and we'll be back after RFK.
All right, so this is going to be RFK giving his keynote speech at the Bitcoin 2024 conference. So they are introducing him right now. Let's go ahead and see what they have to say.
Just to those of a particular race, not just to the wealthy, but to all of the people.
He is actually there. This is just
We must
whatever
do it for the
pre-recorded
single
video they're
and
showing
fundamental
now.
reason that it is the right thing to do.
So here is your independent candidate.
A new twist this morning for the country's most famous political dynasty.
RFK Jr. plans
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
independent
the presidential
on
race
October 9th in the state of
that it's time to heal a divided nation and return the power to the people. Robert Kennedy Jr.
Intense. Philadelphia. Declare your independence.
We are told today that our nation is hopelessly divided. But I found something different as I travel this country. I have witnessed an upwelling of optimism that I've never seen before. Something is stirring in us that says it doesn't have to be this way. And so I've come here today to declare our independence from the tyranny of corruption, which robs us of affordable lives, our belief in the future,
No war.
and our respect for each other. But to do that, I must first declare my own independence. Independence from the Democratic Party and from all other political parties.
I see him dropping out and supporting Trump.
I haven't made this
If I'm being
decision
honest.
lightly. It's very painful for me to let go of the party of my uncles, my father, my grandfather, and both of my great-grandfathers. But my sacrifice is nothing compared to the risk our founding fathers took when they signed the Declaration of Independence 247 years ago. They knew that if their revolution failed, every last one of them would be hanged. They chose to place everything on the line. When John Adams put his pen down after adding his signature to the Declaration, he turned to those present and he said to them, sink or swim, live or die, survive or perish. From this day on, I am with my country. I'm going to make that same pledge to you today so that I can stand before you, as every leader should stand before you, free of partisan allegiance, free from the backroom deals, a servant only to my conscience, to my Creator, and to you. Every president enters office promising to unite the nation and to work with people from the other party across the aisle. None of them ever does it. They can't. They're already chosen a side. Well, I'm not going to have that problem. I'm going to build coalitions from both sides of the aisle. And except for the small minority of public officials who are actually corrupt, I'm going to tell you this secret. They too want liberation from the system that has captured them. And isn't that ultimately what we all want? Liberation from a system that robs us of our wealth, our health, our hope, our patriotism, our ideals, our freedoms, and ultimately our sense of ourselves as a good and capable people. Is healing our divided nation possible? Let's go take back our country. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
All right, so there's his campaign video. Pretty cool. Oh, come on, man. You're gonna come out with some music that's gonna try and trigger some demonetization? Or get me a strike? Come on. So they're announcing him now. I'm gonna wait for the music to shut off, but here he comes, Robert F. Kennedy. All right, got the mic. Shut the music off. Look at that crowd, though. That's pretty cool. A lot of phones. All right, here we go.
Hello, Bitcoiners. I am so glad to be back for my second Bitcoin conference.
Yeah, he was there last year.
Since last year in Miami, I've been meeting with leaders and thinkers from this community. I've conferred with Bitcoin miners, with policymakers, with economists, with financial experts, with investors and developers and entrepreneurs to deepen my understanding of the extraordinary promise of Bitcoin for our country and for our planet. After all I've learned, I intend, as President of the United States, to sign an executive order on day one, directing the Department of Justice and the U.S. Marshals to transfer the approximately 200,000 Bitcoin held by the U.S. government to the United States Treasury, where it will be held as a strategic asset.
Okay. Okay, I dig it.
On day one as president, I will sign another executive order directing the U.S. Treasury to purchase 550 Bitcoin daily until the U.S. has built a reserve of at least 4 million Bitcoins.
Wow. That's going to pump my bags quite a bit.
And a position of dominance that no other country will be able to usurp. Our nation holds approximately 19% of global gold reserves. This policy will give us about the same proportion of total Bitcoin. The cascading impact from these actions will eventually move Bitcoin to a valuation of hundreds of trillions of dollars. On day one as president, I will sign also an executive order directing the IRS to issue public guidelines that all transactions between Bitcoin and the US dollar are unreportable transactions.
All right, there we go. I missed what he said. My dog was barking. Still barking.
And by extension, non-taxable.
Are you saying make Bitcoin not taxable? Sign me up.
On day one as president, I will also sign an executive order directing the IRS to treat Bitcoin as an eligible asset for 1031 exchange into real property.
Oh, wow.
Now, I want to say a couple of words about my observations about the Bitcoin community.
We had a lot of tax moves
which
there.
I consider myself part of. Despite their different viewpoints, I found the most striking feature of Bitcoin community is this kind of paradoxical juxtaposition marked by fierce divisions on several minor issues and an overwhelming sense of unity within the larger Bitcoin ecosystem. The Bitcoin community reminds me of how American politics ought to be, fiercely diverse, but ultimately united in our aspirations and our belief in our country and in our convictions that America is worth the fight. And in the end, we all come back together, united in our belief that Bitcoin is a technology for freedom, for optimism, for independence, for democracy and transparency. It is the currency of hope. It is the perfect currency. It is an elegant, poetic, beautiful, pure species that aligns perfectly with the highest ideals and aspirations represented by the American experiment with self-governance. It is incorruptible, it has integrity, it has self-sovereignty, it promotes personal responsibility and accountability, it is decentralized and democratic, it is small on government and large on personal freedom. Bitcoin is anti-war. It is a fierce, merciless, and insurmountable foe of government corruption. Now, many of you know my own introduction to Bitcoin, my own conversion. I knew from my children about Bitcoin, but it was it seemed almost to me something like a fad or a novelty. And then I saw what happened in Ottawa. I was running at that time the Children's Health Defense, which was the premier advocate for medical freedom in our country. And we had embedded with the striking truckers in Canada,
it's a big issue.
Reporter for our newsletter, and she was traveling with the truckers from Alberta all the way to Ottawa. And the truckers are very diverse in Canada. They're Asian, they're black, they're white. The trucking strike, the truckers were doing something that all of us in our country take for granted. They were assembling to petition their government about something that they thought was important, which was that the impacts, the financial impacts of the mandates on their businesses. If you look at the videos of that event, it was like Woodstock. People were giving out water bottles, they were picking up trash, they were playing music, they were being kind to each other.
And then they shut their bank accounts down.
But it was portrayed by the Canadian government as a right-wing, extremist, violent terror organization. And the government began using facial recognition systems and other forms of surveillance to learn the identity of the truckers, looking at their license plates, et cetera. And then it froze their bank accounts.
Yeah.
And it froze their $12 million PayPal account. And when Canada did that, it occurred that the premier template of democracy in the world besides the United States, it occurred to me immediately that transactional freedom was as important as freedom of expression in the First Amendment.
Absolutely agree.
Because if the government has the capacity, none of these truckers were charged with a crime, much less convicted.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the government was able to shut down their bank accounts. They couldn't pay their mortgages. They couldn't buy diesel for their trucks. They couldn't buy food for their children. One trucker told me that he was going to jail because he couldn't make mandatory alimony payments. And if a government is able to starve you, to evict you from your home, if you speak out against it, if you criticize government policies, then we are on the road to totalitarianism and slavery.
That's in Canada,
and I
too.
began at that time looking seriously for alternatives, and it was that incident that led me immediately to grasp the potential of this technology to provide transactional freedom and self-sovereignty. Last year at this conference, I proposed that as your president, I would fight to ensure the right to self-custody Bitcoin, to run nodes in our own homes, to stop the federal government from usurping the First Amendment rights to open source, privacy-enhancing technologies. I pledged to prevent government officials from adopting CBDCs, which would inevitably morph into what we saw in Canada, a malevolent tool for surveillance and control.
Absolutely.
Most importantly, I promise to secure the United States position as the global hub of cryptocurrency innovation and entrepreneurship and investment and technology.
That camera guy keeps shaking. I need to get him a tripod or something.
As a lifelong environmentalist, I embrace Bitcoin as a mechanism for incentivizing greater investments in green and renewable energy production. After the time I spent with Bitcoiners last year, I left the Miami conference so enthralled with optimism and excitement about Bitcoin and its potential to eliminate the national debt as a hedge against inflation, its promise to guarantee personal freedom, to restore the American middle class, to end government corruption, to defund the war machine, and to protect our environment. And I happened just before that, at Miami convention, I got a big check from the fees from winning the Monsanto case. And I took most of that check, which represented the largest portion of my personal wealth, and I invested it all in Bitcoin.
Wow.
Now, I didn't do that with the hopes for a quick return on investment. I was told you might have to wait a long time, and you might have to have a lot of anxiety and angina. So I was prepared for that. But if that had been my sole motive, by the way, I would not have been disappointed. So I got in it with good timing. But over the past year, I've gone even further down the rabbit hole. Let me put it, the orange rabbit hole. I'm convinced now more than ever that we have to work together to put all these proposals into action immediately. America's at a crossroads. We can either continue down the path we are on, racking up debt, constricting freedom, addicted to war, or we can look forward to use new technologies like Bitcoin to help us evolve, to achieve again our promise as a moral authority and the world's exemplar for incorruptible democratic governance.
I dig it. I like it.
Now, I'm very
What do you think,
happy
chat?
to learn that I'm not the only one talking about Bitcoin in this year's election. Nothing could make me more joyful than to see other political leaders now jumping on the Bitcoin bandwagon.
Yeah, Trump's
I've had
your
over
keynote
years
speaker
head start
tomorrow.
to study, to understand, to articulate the potential of Bitcoin. And my goal as the first Bitcoin president will be to enact policies that will make America the world's greatest representative for Bitcoin and a proponent of its democratic values. I grew up assuming that America would always maintain its status as the world leader, the leader of the free world. But ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1993, we've paradoxically been moving in a declining spiral away from that role. Hubris, military adventurism, and corruption have put America's political and economic power in precipitous decline. Our dollar is rapidly losing its reserve currency status because we've weaponized it against other countries. When we disagree with the policies of another country, we kick them off the SWIFT system and we debank them. As a predictable result of that strategy, the BRICS nations are now in the process of de-dollarizing by getting off the petrodollar. They realize that trading their commodities and other hard resources for money that is printed out of thin air is a losing proposition. This trend will likely accelerate until we make the tough transition toward backing our debt obligations with hard assets again.
Is he going to say it? Is he going to say Bitcoin? Are you going to back the dollar with Bitcoin?
I have a plan to strengthen the U.S. dollar.
Here it comes.
Lower the interest rates and neutralize our $34 trillion debt by backing U.S. Treasury bills, notes, and bonds with hard assets, including a combination of precious metals and Bitcoin.
Yeah, Bitcoin. There it is.
Backing U.S. debt obligations by collateralizing them with hard assets not only restores strength to the dollar, it reins in inflation, and it will usher in a new era of American financial stability, prosperity, and peace. The world needs to believe that we have safely handcuffed our government and its ability to create money out of thin air with no proof of work. The innovative strategy that I'm proposing leverages the scarcity and liquidity of Bitcoin, along with gold and other hard assets, to restore the dollar's dominance in global finance. The world will rush to adopt an American-backed, decentralized currency that cannot be confiscated by governments, that can be traded and transacted on cell phones at the speed of light across every global border with no banking fees or other transactional friction. This incorruptible currency will immediately start pulling wealth and assets from every other nation around the globe back into the United States, restoring the strength of our dollar and repairing our balance of payments. 6 months before his assassination, my uncle President John F. Kennedy, signed an executive order that put silver coins in competition with the notes issued by the Fed. His intention was to rein in Fed discretion. He had been a critic of Fed policy, and he hoped to end the discretionary monetary policy and the inevitable debasement of the U.S. dollar. He understood that a highly leveraged economy leads directly to the destructive kind of wealth inequality that is today eroding American democracy and generating violence and division and discontent and hopelessness. Notably, after my uncle's assassination, the government immediately stopped issuing those silver coins and power returned to the Fed. My uncle apparently understood the potential for the Fed to evolve itself into a tyranny. Bitcoin has the potential to return monetary discipline to the Fed and to restore the dollar as the unchallenged global reserve currency. And just as Bitcoin can fortify the dollar, it can also secure America's position in cyberspace. I understand that tomorrow President Trump may announce his plan to build a Bitcoin Fort Knox and
Man, I'm
authorize
so
the
ready to
US
hear what he has
government
to say about Bitcoin
to buy
tomorrow.
1 million Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. And I applaud that announcement, and we should all applaud it. I hope that President Trump's commitment to Bitcoin is more than political expediency. The most cynical political reason for endorsing Bitcoin is to excite the 60 million Bitcoin American holders by policies that make the number go up. But it's my hope that President Trump and the DNC nominee, who he or she may be,
It's already been decided it's Harris.
develop a deeper understanding of the earth-shaking reasons to ensure that Bitcoin has a strategic reserve in the U.S. Treasury. The most compelling of those reasons is laid out in U.S. Space Force major Jason Lowery's MIT thesis entitled Software. Major Lowery points out that Bitcoin has been mischaracterized as money, when in fact it is a cyber defense system that will protect our online identities and data in cyberspace. Just as we have an Air Force to protect our skies and a Navy to
Was that
protect
Secret
our
Service back
seas,
there?
Bitcoin can protect us against potential cyber attacks. It is a cyber defense weapon and a classic example of unrecognized use. Here's an analogous example. The Chinese invented gunpowder, and then they used it as medicine for 200 years before other countries recognized that it was the most potent tool for power projection. Today, the popularly assumed use of Bitcoin is money. But Bitcoin is also a power projection weapon that can protect our currency and everything that we do online from cyber attacks. The first country that recognizes this function will be the new global superpower. We need to grab the reins and harness Bitcoin's full potential if we want to regain and consolidate our title as leader of the free world. Based on public information, the USA currently owns 204,000 Bitcoins, the fifth largest Bitcoin wallet in the world. Adding Bitcoin to that reserve will help secure the future of the United States for the next 250 years. One of my first hires in the Kennedy administration would be Major Lowery as my top advisor.
Oh, wow.
As my top advisor for my national security team. Another important use of Bitcoin for America and the world is the one that is dearest to my heart, capturing carbon and incentivizing green energy production through Bitcoin mining. I served for 40 years as an environmental champion and for a decade as a partner in the green tech venture capital firm Vantage Point, which is the #1 green tech energy and technology firm in the world. I played key roles in developing some of the world's largest solar and wind power generation projects. Critics of Bitcoin have wrongly cast it as an environmental threat because of its high energy demand. The opposite, of course, is true. Bitcoin miners are more sensitive to energy pricing than any other industry. This means that they can only survive in the marketplace by utilizing the cheapest energy, and that invariably means waste energy and surplus power. For example, methane from landfills would otherwise go into the atmosphere, but Bitcoin miners are uniquely able to harness it as an energy source. Bitcoin mining is also the ideal partner for renewable energy and variable power projects like wind and solar. My personal finance left me with a deep appreciation for the critical potential for Bitcoin mining as a reliable profit center for renewable energy projects that need flexible, on-site, off-peak customers for intermittent energy generation.
Jason says, too bad he has no chance of winning.
Miners are the
Yeah, I'm
ideal
totally with you,
projects
Jason. He has no chance of winning.
for these kind of
Great
projects.
policy. All for it. Pretty cool. But
Let's
if
lean
I'm
into some of
predicting
the
the
other ways
future,
that
I think
Bitcoin is good for
he is going
Americans
to
and
drop
for
out
America.
and he's going to endorse
President
Donald
Nixon
Trump.
took us off the gold standard
Just what
in
I'm thinking.
1971 to finance the Vietnam War. Since then, the dollar's purchasing power has been in precipitous decline, eroding savings and earnings of everyday Americans. Alan Greenspan, who was the chair of the Fed for 20 years,
Yeah, I'm with
even
you. He
warned
has no
that,
chance.
quote,
People are not going to vote
In the
for
absence of a
third
gold
party.
standard, there is no way to prevent savings from confiscation through inflation. End quote. Inflation, as we all know, is theft. And it's almost always theft from the poor.
And I highly doubt Trump is going to come out tomorrow and say
has
that he
engineered
wants
an
to
uber-efficient
back the dollar with Bitcoin.
money printing machine
I would be very
perpetrate
surprised if he says that
systematic
tomorrow.
robbery that has gutted the American middle class and decimated America's working poor. The obscene money printing has drained our citizens of their purchasing power through the hidden tax of inflation. And it was the Trump and Biden administration's reckless embrace of money printing that have pushed the middle class over the tipping point now. American households are now buckling under the strain. Let's look at it simply. If you had $1,000 6 years ago, that $1,000 has a value of $520 today in terms of its capacity to purchase goods and services. Mortgages have doubled in 4 years. No wonder half of the 18 to 30-year-olds are still living at home.
Tell me about it.
Unable
Trying to buy a
afford
house.
the homes that provide the first step
Not easy.
toward the American dream. No wonder our younger Americans are marrying later, delaying or even abandoning the choice to start a family. Their dwindling purchasing power forces them into these sacrifices. The hopelessness of the task of steadily growing savings, which we all assumed that was just part of our lives, it has pushed. And now today, this generation is facing these moving goalposts. They make money, they think they're doing well, and then the money disappears. And not for anything they did, but because inflation. And it has pushed this whole generation into a kind of financial nihilism. And it's contributed to the epidemics of depression, of suicide, of hopelessness, of alienation, of dispossession, of the loss of pride in our country, the loss of hope for their own generation and their own futures among young Americans. Healthcare costs are also increasing exponentially. I talked a couple of months ago with a young New Hampshire couple, and they told me with tears in their eyes how they had gotten in an argument, the husband and wife, holding a crying baby in their arms at night and having to wonder about whether that baby was $50 sick or $100 sick or $500 sick before they brought him to the emergency room.
That's sad.
Over half of Americans cannot put their hands on $1,000 if they have emergency. If you are part of that cohort and the engine light goes on in your car, it is the apocalypse, because you know you're not going to be able to afford the mechanic. You won't be able to get to work. You won't be able to pay your rent, and then you're going to be out on the sidewalk. And that decibel has ended up with this army, tent encampments in the cities that I live in Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco, and all over the country, where armies of Americans, of hardworking Americans, are now living because the engine light came on in their car, or they got 2 flat tires at once, or they had some other expense that was unanticipated. Walk outside and you're going to see it. Time and again, I'm hearing from elderly Americans about how they cut their prescription pills in two to make them last to the end of the week. They're choosing between gasoline and home heating oil and food. So many mothers have told me that they're downgrading ingredients to get out the grocery store checkout line. Americans today are being forced to make these gut-wrenching decisions because our money is broken. With a beleaguered American middle class,
Yeah, let's not clap for that. That's actually really sad.
For the beleaguered American middle class, Bitcoin is the off-ramp from the inflation highway of doom. If the world were on a Bitcoin standard and our money held its value, we would all have the ability to live more abundant lives. Bitcoiners
Russell
have it right.
Brand is next.
Fix the money.
I personally do not care for Russell Brand, so I'm not going to watch that one.
The discipline of tying our dollars to hard assets like Bitcoin will also finally break our addiction to forever wars. Fiat currency was invented to fund war. As I pointed out just now, President Nixon got us off the gold standard in 1971 because printing fiat currency was the only way to continually finance the Vietnam War. Prior to fiat currency, when a country ran out of money, the war would end. Or if a government wanted to fund a war, it would issue war bonds and borrow the money from its citizens, or it would tell them in advance, we're going to tax you. Today, governments don't need to even ask that permission.
Print that money, baby.
Print the money. And
get it going.
And then they fund the war with fake money. If the world was on a Bitcoin standard, then there would be no war because the governments can't print Bitcoin.
Well, I don't know about if there would be no war, but I understand his point.
I'm a proponent of Bitcoin because it can defund the military-industrial complex that is bent not on national defense, but on international global domination. And I'll say this, during the height of the Cold War, the military budget was about $500 billion in 2024 dollars. Today, it's double that. Why do we need twice the money and we need it during the height of the Cold War? Well, we need it because it has nothing to do with national defense. It has to do with global hegemony and international domination that is actually counterproductive.
What happened to the feed? There we go.
Bankrupting us at home. And
come on, guys.
It has destroyed our relationships and our moral authority across the globe. Oh, let me say it again. If governments couldn't print money with a couple of keystrokes on a computer, they wouldn't be able to fund wars that never end. Again, fix the money, fix the world. And make no mistake, one of the main reasons my administration will fix our broken money is to defund the war machine. To reach that goal, I'm going to support making direct ownership of Bitcoin tax-free. The conversion of Bitcoin back into dollars will be non-reportable transaction to the IRS and not subject to capital gains. We have to remember that the Fourth Amendment guarantees the right to privacy. As a constitutionalist, I'm an adamant defender of our right to financial and transactional privacy. When U.S. citizens are required to report every Bitcoin transaction to the IRS, the government knows everything that we are doing with our money.
Yep.
Governments have no business knowing your business. More importantly, making the direct ownership of Bitcoin tax-free creates financial incentive to own Bitcoin and not a Bitcoin ETF, which is a security and therefore subject to capital gains.
Mm-hmm.
This is crucial because direct ownership of Bitcoin keeps it decentralized. And And that is the only way to prevent BlackRock and other global asset managers from having undue influence over the Bitcoin network, over its forks, and over its upgrades. In 2014, the IRS declared Bitcoin to be property and regulated the purchase and sale as a capital transaction. It's important to understand that this tax law was never passed by Congress, and it was never signed into law by the President of the United States. The IRS and the SEC simply usurped government power in order to suppress decentralized financial democracy. The U.S. Supreme Court recently, of the Chevron doctrine, reopens that decision. And that decision has allowed freedom-fighting Bitcoiners to challenge the constitutionality of taxing Bitcoin for the 2024 year. I'm telling you today that I will never, ever sign a law that taxes direct ownership of Bitcoin. I will use my power to reverse any law that does so. I will end the Biden administration's war on Bitcoin. Tax-free Bitcoin is not only critical for citizens' financial autonomy, freedom, and privacy, it is essential to keep it decentralized and democratic as Satoshi created it to be. Finally, Bitcoin guarantees property rights. With freely transactable Bitcoin, no government will be able to confiscate or tax your wealth at the border. This is another example of Bitcoin's potency as a weapon against totalitarianism. So as this election cycle starts to heat up, you have choices to make. You've heard what I propose to do. Let's compare that to what my Republican opponent proposes. And I welcome President Trump's new enthusiasm for Bitcoin, but he's only weeks into the Bitcoin dialogue.
Yeah, he did say Bitcoin was a scam in the past. He just flipped on it not too long ago.
Hopefully his learning curve will mirror the kind that I went through. My guess is that initially, at least, there's going to be a lot of talk about pricing and how a change in government policies can make Bitcoiners wealthy. But we all know that that is just one of the minor points of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is about something much bigger. Bitcoin is about our souls. It's about our values. The price go up feature is the least of all of its attributes. President Trump has a long way to go to explain how his personal values align with those of Bitcoiners. If he doesn't do that, then we don't really have any assurance, do we, that his endorsement is not another ephemeral monetary policy fad du jour. That assurance will require him to repudiate some of the central policies of his last administration. During his years in the White House, President Trump had consistently spoke out against Bitcoin. In December of 2020, he was openly hostile to Bitcoin and tried to outlaw self-custody wallets. This was a time when Americans, particularly, more than any time in our history, needed any store of value that they could get to compensate for the hits to their income from the lockdowns, from the declining purchasing power due to the money printing orgy and the COVID closures of all of our businesses. In 2021, President Trump doubled down and declared that Bitcoin, it just seems like a scam.
Yeah, I remember that.
I don't like it because it's another currency competing against the dollar. I'm happy that President Trump has had this evolution. I'm proud that I helped blaze a trail that made it easier for other political leaders to follow. And I'm grateful to the 50 or 60 million Bitcoiners like Michael Saylor who were there before me and helped me understand the nation-saving potential of Bitcoin. Every Bitcoiner I know shares my own yearning for freedom, for my skepticism toward official orthodoxies and pronouncements, and an inclination for critical thinking that I most admire. During COVID, neither President Trump nor President Biden protected our constitutional rights. They both restricted our right to assemble, to worship. They closed our churches, no funeral for grandma, no weddings. They closed our businesses without due process or just compensation in violation of the Fifth Amendment. They ended the Seventh Amendment right to jury trials. They assaulted the Fourth Amendment prohibition against warrantless searches and seizures, and also both these administrations allowed the FBI and the spy agencies to suppress our rights to free speech by working with social media companies to deplatform people who criticize government policies. I hope that President Trump's change of heart in Bitcoin is evidence of a newfound and deep-seated commitment to personal freedoms, to our Constitution, to our Bill of Rights. Will President Trump fight for Bitcoin if he's elected? I wish he had mentioned Bitcoin in the RNC speech last week. I'm disappointed. He spent a lot of the last week attacking President Bukele of El Salvador, the only country on a Bitcoin standard. President Bukele is the most popular president in El Salvador's history.
Bukele was importing the worst people into the USA.
Bitcoin helped him grow the economy and reduce crime. The U.S. should want to take a page from President Bukele's playbook and learn some of the lessons that he has to teach us about Bitcoin. And even more alarming, President Trump, in an interview last month with Bloomberg, floated the idea of bringing on Jamie Dimon as his Secretary of Treasury.
You did.
I'm grateful that President Trump yesterday walked back that comment, but I'm not sure how he could have ever considered bringing on one of the biggest long-time critics of Bitcoin and the world's ultimate advocate for centralized control, if he truly is committed in his soul to the freedom and decentralization that we all are committed to. Those choices don't match the spiritual alignment of Bitcoin. Bitcoin represents, personally, I would rather see somebody like Michael Saylor or Caitlin Long as Treasury Secretary.
All right. I don't think he's running.
They are brilliant. They are encyclopedic. They're forward-thinking. They deeply love our country. And they represent the ideals of decentralization and economic democracy. Finally, President Trump has had 4 years to pardon Ross Ulbricht and Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. And he didn't do it. And we need to ask ourselves why. I've already looked into those cases, and I plan on pardoning them all on day one.
I really don't like when they try to use Ross as some kind of champion of Bitcoin. Really don't like it. That dude was a criminal.
In this election year, I encourage you to study your choices, look at the candidate's policy, but more importantly, look at their actions to decide if they are genuinely part of the problem or if they're part of the solution. Decide if they align with what you believe in your heart. Remember, Americans need, and remember what Americans need and what we want, and then vote accordingly. I want to leave you today with a core belief in Bitcoin, in the Bitcoin community. Bitcoin is the currency of freedom, the currency of liberty, the currency of hope. It restores self-sovereignty back to the individual, which is the whole purpose of American democracy. It gives us digital property rights, which is the core of our democracy. And it provides a store of value that will allow middle-class Americans to live in abundance again. I want to be the president who can bring back hope. And I'm grateful to be part of your Bitcoin community. In fact, I don't think of myself as red I don't think of myself as blue, and I don't even think of myself as purple. Those are the colors of the political parties. Instead, I think of myself as orange.
Lame. All right, then.
That is the color of freedom. And it's true that President Trump has orange hair. And I can only admire him for that from afar. I'll never be able to match him on that. It's a really great start. But I have an orange heart. And that's what you should support. Thank you all very much, and God bless you.
I don't know. That ending was a little bit weird. So there you have it. That is RFK. I think I've been on here for like almost 4 hours now, so I'm gonna sign off on this one. There's not really anyone else on the agenda that I want to watch, so that's gonna be it. Thank y'all for watching with me.